And switch them on when you speak, of course. Remarkable. Okay, do remain seated while you're using your microphone. Because of the live streaming, it does make it difficult for members of the public to hear. Whilst we may not struggle to hear you, they might. If you are wearing a mask, please remove it when you speak. And don't hold your microphone by the stem and pick it up or anything like that, because they are quite expensive to repair. Right, item 1, apologies. Chief Executive.
Thank you. Apologies have been received from the following councillors: Tom Biggins, Ed Bird, Julian Dean, Paul Gill, Richard Huffer, Tracy Huffer, David Minery, Alan Mosley, Peggy Mullock, Kevin Turley, Alex Wagner, Rob Wilson. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item 2 is disclosable interests. I would remind members to disclose any pecuniary interest, either registrable or non-registrable interests on any matter to be discussed, including the interest in their register of interests, and leave the chamber prior to the matter being discussed.
Mr. Chairman, I have a pecuniary interest in item number 19. I will take no part in the debate and leave the room.
Sorry, who was that?
Sorry,
I didn't see the hand.
Councillor Leslie Picton sitting to your left.
All right, that's probably why then. Okay.
Yeah. Items number 19 and 20.
Yeah, say your name as well, because
Councillor.
obviously not standing up, it is difficult to hear sometimes where the voice is coming from, and we want to make sure that it's reflected correctly in the minutes.
Councillor Jeff Anderson.
Thank you. Claire?
Thank you. My name is Claire Wild. I'm the councillor for the Severn Valley, and I have a prejudicial interest in items, I think 18 and 19, but I shall leave for the exempt portion of the meeting. Thank you. Bye.
Good. Anybody else? Can't see any other hands.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I might need to declare an interest in item 18 as well, the exempt minutes.
Okay, that's okay. We'll move on then to the item 3, the minutes. I move the minutes of the previous council meeting held on the 12th of May 2022, as circulated with the agenda papers, be signed as a correct record.
I second those minutes.
Thank you. Councillor Vasmer. I would remind you that members can only raise items questioning the accuracy of the minutes. They can't raise any matter or question, exploration or debate.
Well, it's just that the minutes are always very late compared to what parish councils manage to do, to get minutes out within a month of the meeting. And it would just be very helpful, I think, for all members to have minutes out earlier so that we can outreach refer to them before the next meeting.
That was perhaps something that would have been better raised from the outside of the meeting, because it's not actually about the accuracy of the minutes, but point taken. Okay, anybody else got any issues with the accuracy of the minutes? No. Well, it's been proposed and seconded. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Abstentions? Mark, thank you. Okay. Announcements. To receive any such communications as the Chair, Vice Chair and the Head of Page Service may desire to lay before the Council. We welcome Councillor Mark Williams, who was elected to the Council in the Highley Division by-election on the 23rd of June 2022. Welcome. Good luck. Okay. 4.2, I intend to vary the order of the agenda, and we will take item 19, the Shrewsbury acquisition, after item 21. That's so that members who have to leave the room are able to leave the room at the end of business rather than leave and then come back in like yo-yos. So I take it everybody's happy with that. And also I refer members to the list of official engagements carried out by the Chair and Vice Chair since the meeting of Council on the 12th of May 2022, which has been circulated by email. Good. We'll move on to item 5, which is public questions. In accordance with Procedure Rule 40, we will now deal with the questions from members of the public in accordance with the revised procedure rules. The Assistant Director of Legal and Democratic Services will read out the public questions received from members of the public who are not present. The relevant portfolio holder will respond to the questions. We've had 6 public questions. Question 1. Bob Saunders here.
Why are pedestrians only allowed a few seconds to cross at traffic lights at the Welsh Bridge and the crossing at Smithfield Road by the station in Shrewsbury? In many other parts of the country, councils have retimed traffic lights to allow reasonable time for pedestrians, providing a more equitable balance between those who wish to walk and those who drive. Retiming traffic lights would be a simple, low-cost way to encourage more active travel, as well as making it safer for pedestrians.
Thank you. Councillor Carroll.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. All pedestrian crossing timings in Shropshire are calculated in accordance with the national guidance contained within the Department for Transport document Traffic Signs Manual Chapter 6, and therefore allow reasonable time for pedestrians to cross safely. Whilst it may appear that they only have a few seconds, the green man shown to pedestrians is short and typically only 4 to 6 seconds in length. It is important to remember that the green man period is only intended to act as an invitation for pedestrians to cross, and therefore is not in place for the full duration of the crossing to minimise future delays to traffic. Pedestrian safety beyond the initial green man period is achieved with the use of on-crossing above ground detectors, which will hold traffic on red until all crossing movements have been completed, subject to a maximum timing which is calculated in accordance with national guidance using a walking speed of 1.2 metres per second.
Thank you. Question 2 is from Tina Tiru. Tina here? No. Tim?
So her question is this. It is now 3 years since this council acknowledged the imperative need to cut down on carbon emissions in Shropshire by declaring a climate emergency. Working with Zero Carbon Shropshire, you made a good start. But 3 years on, I am concerned that the council has not entirely understood the gravity of the situation that we as humanity find ourselves in. The recent IPCC report, which is based on many years of scientific research, makes it absolutely clear that humans are causing the climate emergency by burning fossil fuels to provide energy. We are seeing the early effects of this global temperature rise right here in Shropshire, with the more frequent incidents of flooding. If we do not keep the rise below 1.5 degrees of pre-industrial levels, we lose any hope of retaining a livable planet for future generations. Please think about that for a moment. Shropshire must do much more to decarbonise and do it much more quickly than it is currently doing. Business as usual is no longer an option. We must adopt a more sustainable way of life immediately. My question is, can the council not see that there is a simple solution to instantly save 135 years worth of carbon costs and millions of pounds of taxpayers' money? Cancel the North West Relief Road. Why are you not embracing this opportunity?
Thank you. Councillor Carroll.
Thank you. The proposal to deliver the North West Relief Road has been carefully reviewed in the light of the council's stated carbon position. A rigorous modelling and forecasting exercise, both for the construction phase and the future lifetime use of the scheme, has been undertaken and published on the council's website. Further to this, the methodology and conclusions within the report have been independently reviewed by an academic specialist at Birmingham University. The findings of the report highlight a net carbon legacy for the scheme in the region of 24,000 tonnes over the lifetime of the scheme. This impact has already been considerably mitigated through informed design choices, such as built materials and methodology, and the acknowledgement of net carbon savings on the highways network more widely within Shrewsbury. In order to reduce this legacy still further and potentially to a net zero balance, Shropshire Council is now exploring a range of innovative carbon in and offsetting opportunities within the proximity of the new road and Shropshire more widely. The cost and nature of these measures, along with the final carbon account for the road, will be collated within the full business case. This is expected by December 2022 and will be considered for endorsement by all council members in advance of its submittance to the Department for Transport to release the required construction costs in full.
Thank you. Question 3 is from Pamela Pink. Tim?
Her question is this. Will you please explain what is happening to the Shropshire bus services? Elderly and disabled people dependent on the bus services across the county are finding that services are severely cut, much to their dismay. How are people to get to work on time? The Prime Minister promised £31 billion to improve services, particularly to help people in country areas. Why is this not happening? Why is the council neglecting its duty to the poor and needy? An elderly blind person in Oswestry today was in tears because she had to wait an hour for a bus to Shrewsbury, not knowing that services had been cut. This is not good enough.
Thank you. Councillor Cecilia Motley for the answer, please.
Thank you for the question. As you may be aware, Arriva recently announced that due to a reduction in the numbers of passengers, they needed to either amend a number of bus services or in some cases withdraw entirely from them, with a number of these services being commercially operated and for which the council has no control. To provide some stability to the network, the council has stepped in to provide some emergency support to ensure that services remain in place whilst we consider our options here. That does not mean our support then stops. It gives passengers some reassurance and also allows us to enter into discussions with Arriva and other providers, and news on what will happen beyond this initial emergency funding will be announced shortly. The 3.1 billion to which you refer, rather than 31 billion in your question, was the original funding that was announced to realise the government's ambitions within the National Bus Strategy, and for which we submitted an ambitious plan to transform public transport in Shropshire. Unfortunately, like many other rural authorities, we were unsuccessful in our bid, and this was in part due to the fact that the initial funding allocation of 3.1 billion was reduced by government to circa 1.2 billion. We are continuing to press our case with funding to government and will also be submitting a bid to transform public transport in Shropshire as part of the second round of levelling up funding announced by the government.
Thank you. Question 4 is a question from Stephen Malloy. I can't see Mr. Malloy. So.
His question is this. The Committee on Standards in Public Life is carrying out a review examining the role of leadership in embedding the 7 principles of public life in public sector organisations. The 7 principles of public life are honesty, objectivity, openness, selflessness, integrity, accountability and leadership. They want to hear how ethical standards are upheld within organisations and welcome examples of good practice from across the public sector. The deadline for submissions is 5 o'clock on Friday the 29th of July, using the attached case study template. Can I ask if the leader of Shropshire Council will be responding to this review, and if so, will she share her examples or experience of good practice in ethical standards with this meeting of Shropshire Full Council?
Councillor Picton.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your question, Mr. Malloy. I have referred this to the Chair of our Standards Committee, Councillor David Evans, and he will consider, along with the Monitoring Officer, a suitable case study to submit to the Committee on Standards in Public Life by the deadline of the 29th of July. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 5 is from Darren Childs. Mr. Childs.
In February, the councillors voted unanimously to back Ludlow and South Shropshire's campaign to return the rural ambulance stations. This was an important and very welcome gesture of support. I have learned that in the ambulance response times that this is just the tip of the iceberg. a symptom of wider crisis in flow across A&E and acute hospitals in Shrewsbury and Telford and in social care. SATH typically has in the region of 120 patients a day who are fit for discharge but cannot leave hospital. This contributes very substantially to the lack of availability of hospital beds to the A&E becoming full. And the ambulance is off the road because they are queuing up outside A&E at Telford and Shrewsbury. Will Shropshire Council meet with ICS leaders again to explore the possibility of joint funding and management of cohort of staff who could be used flexibly to provide a routine healthcare and social care to patients being discharged from hospital, filling in the gaps until a longer term agreement can be put in place? Can discussion take place on direct employment of staff from a variety of companies and areas across the care sector to ensure the pay and conditions that will support retention? There would be, of course, a cost to this, but considerably less than the health and social care system incurs now through failing to achieve times of discharge of patients from hospital. If cost is an issue, and I suspect it will be, will the Council approach Shropshire's 4 MPs and seek their support as a matter of urgency in approaching the Department of Health and Social Care and appropriate ministers, if there's any left, in an attempt to secure additional funding and also provide the public with updates? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Simon Jones, the portfolio holder for adult social care and public health. Councillor Jones.
I can thank you, Mr. Childs, for your question. And my response is Shropshire Council's adult social care discharge performance remains high, with double the number of discharges compared to pre-pandemic years. The number of people that are medically fit for discharge will include both Shropshire and Telford and Wrekin residents, and a proportion of out-of-county, in particular Powys residents. Our integrated care system, ICS service, is the council's county-wide team who offers a service to adults aged 18 years or over to safely discharge people from hospital and maintain people's safety in the community. The ICS works alongside system partners to provide a range of approaches which support people to avoid unnecessary hospital admission, rapid avoidance AA, facilitate timely and safe hospital discharge, and adopt a system reablement approach which results in better outcomes and avoids readmission into hospital. During pressured times, we review capacity, and our staff often volunteer to do additional hours to support the hospitals and have supported across 7 days a week. We implemented a number of initiatives to support increased demand in the hospitals. One of our winter projects, for example, led and supported by the voluntary and community services, saw an increase of 60% in referrals based on the previous winter 2021. They attended multidisciplinary meetings, and we are working to review this to support flow more this upcoming winter. We've continually moved resources to frailty and A&E to support front door discharges. Our in-house START short-term assessment and reablement team in Shropshire Council's in-house domiciliary care provider, which supports people to regain lost skills, learn new ones, and generally increase their ability and independence. They support on average 82 people with its primary focus on swift discharge from hospital. Reablement is a key focus for the system to ensure people have better outcomes and avoid readmission into hospital. The service is available from 8 AM to 10 PM, 365 days a year, including bank holidays. The rapid response aims to avoid unnecessary hospital admissions and safely support people in their own home. This is a joint partnership between Shropshire Community Health Trust and Shropshire Council. Nurses, care coordinators and support workers across both organisations work together to ensure a seamless service that provides a rapid assessment, treatment and care programme of support to stabilise and support people during the acute episodes of ill health. We're currently involved in a number of transformation plans across the system, which is a positive platform to improve the patient journey and outcome in the future. There are currently pooled resources in joint commissioning through the Better Care Fund, BCF, and we are awaiting further guidance on this for 22-23. This pooled budget is focused on both supporting discharges and prevention, and this is likely to be the continued theme for 22-23. We are working with Shropshire in Care Partners, Shropshire Partners in Care, SPIC, to look at recruitment and retention, and have done recruitment fairs to support the wider system. We've offered incentive payments to the market to support hospital discharge and block contracts. We hope this provides reassurance that partners are continually looking and working together to focus on a system transformation and ways we can align resources and support. This includes working on plans to support demand and capacity modelling to enable us to align resources where they are needed the most and prevent admission, as well as supporting swift discharge. Thank you.
Thank you. Question 6 is from Chris Welsh.
Okay, thank you. Following a publicly available Freedom of Information request, I have been told that Shropshire Council is legally responsible for the Shropshire County Pension Fund as its administering authority. Does Shropshire Council acknowledge that it has legal responsibility for the Shropshire County Pension Fund? And is Shropshire Council concerned that the fund's continued investment in fossil fuel companies could open it up to a future legal challenge from Shropshire residents or fund members who are concerned about the fund's failure to divest from companies whose businesses are incompatible with the Paris Agreement? Therefore, is Shropshire Council planning to take any steps to protect itself from any potential legal challenge along these lines?
Thank you. Leader, Councillor Leslie Picton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Shropshire Council is the administering authority for the Shropshire County Pension Fund and delegates all decisions relating to the pension fund itself to the Pension Committee. The Shropshire Council Pension Fund, the fund, is a part of the Local Government Pension Scheme, which is established under the Superannuation Act 1972 and regulated by a series of regulations made under the 1972 Act. Further to Regulation 53 of the Local Government Pension Scheme Regulations 2013, Shropshire Council is the administering authority for the fund. It is the role of the administering authority to maintain a pension fund for the scheme, and Regulation 53 also states that an administering authority is responsible for managing and administering the scheme in relation to any person for which it is the appropriate administering authority under these regulations. Under the Local Government Pension Scheme Management and Investment of Funds Regulations 2016, the Secretary of State has the power to intervene in the investment function of an administering authority if the administering authority does not have regard to the regulations, guidance, or if other concerns are raised. This may include changing the investment strategy statement and, in extreme circumstances, the transfer of investment powers to the Secretary of State or another nominated person. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Okay, we will move on to item 6, which is the report of the returning officer, Highley Division. I'm going to ask to present and move the report be received and agreed. So,
in seconding that report, may I say how pleasing it is to have another member of the Williams tribe coming to the council. I have been on my own since the late and much loved Mansell Williams left the council, so I welcome Mark Williams and hope that his time here will be a thoroughly enjoyable one and fruitful for the Highley Division. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I take it everybody's happy with that. So do we need to vote on that? We don't do that, just for noting. And again, welcome. Okay, item 7 is the financial outturn 21-22. I invite Councillor Gwilym Butler, the portfolio holder for finance and corporate resources, to present the report and move that the report be received and agreed. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this budget was agreed by Council in February 2021. At that time, we had no knowledge of the worldwide issues post-COVID. supply chain shortages, inflation, and the devastating war in Ukraine, and the subsequent issues, to name but a few, on oil and gas, grain, cooking oil, fertilizers, as one of the breadbaskets of Europe is ravaged, creating severe pressures across the Western world and beyond. Overall, the Council ended the year better than expected. The year saw the use of a control corridor which indicated possible outcomes of between 9 million and 2.5 million overspent against the agreed budget. The outturn ended up at the lower limit of this expectation, supported by robust management action. The outturn was better than forecast in the previous report, Q3, at which time we were seeing inflationary pressures. Key variances included the overspend in children's services, driven by demand which was higher than anticipated in the budget. However, the Ofsted report has indicated that the overall framework for children's care is good. So our work must now focus on how to prevent need, act early to minimise the need, and step down care rapidly, but more importantly, safely within that framework. Other overspending was offset by reduced financing costs, as the cost of some of the capital schemes has slipped forward to later years, generally all out of our control. This is a good result for the Council overall and positions us well to meet challenges such as inflationary pressures in the new budget in 22-23, as well as further pressures in the later years of the medium-term financial strategy. I'm also pleased to report that the collection fund for council tax and business rates has a surplus for the financial year of circa 4 million, which will cushion our overspend and mean at the start of this financial year we will start with a surplus of circa 1.5 million. And I thank all the staff involved in getting us to these positions. Mr. Speaker, I need to use this opportunity to put members on notice of the uncharted waters we are living in around financial pressures. We are already assuming around 8.5 million pressure on this year's budget since it was passed in February. To this end, I will be bringing a paper forward to Cabinet on the 20th of July, updating the medium-term financial strategy and outlining our ways of working moving forward. I am confident we have the tools to be far more agile, and budget issues will be needed to be made as and when required and not wait to an annual report to enable the Council to control and deliver the best possible outcomes under the Shropshire Plan. I will be blunt. There will be hard decisions to be made which won't be easy on how we make the savings for the next 2 years, but we are in the right place and ahead of the game. In this process, every one of you in this chamber will have the opportunity to scrutinise any proposal and bring forward costed alternatives should you wish to via the scrutiny process, which will be transparent and open. Mr. Speaker, I move the recommendations A to J as stated in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's seconded by Leader Leslie, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I reserve my right to reply.
Okay. Roger. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I congratulate the staff and all those involved in producing the outturn that was presented there, and I note with interest what was said at the Cabinet yesterday and also today, and look forward to seeing the financial strategy reassessed in July and hopefully scrutinising later. But in the report before us today, would like to draw certain items to the Council's attention. And if we look at the appendices, and it's easier there, and I won't go down them in detail, but if we look at Appendix 1, the budget variations, there's £2.6 million there saved as one-offs on vacancies, COVID grants, including income to pay for the seconded staff. That 2.6 million will not be there this year. There's also climate change. I note in the papers that in the budget for February, agreed in February 21, there was just over £1 million budgeted for climate change. But again, as is shown, it underspent by £624,000. We only spent £418,000. A climate emergency. This was referred to in one of the public questions. and we seem to be playing at it. I would hope in the amended budget that comes forward, we ensure that all the money that is there for climate emergency is spent in the best possible places. I see also in Appendix 7, the general fund reduced during the year in question from 14 million down to 11.5 million due to the overspend, due to the money needed to bring forward the balance that it was there. That money is far below where it should be, where the recommendation should be. So again, I look forward to the proposals, and yes, there will be hard decisions, but some of it is of the making of the administration to my right, decisions in previous years. We have put forward, I put forward a number of proposals which would have reduced the revenue spend, and it would have improved no end the life of Shropshire residents and improved the financial position. Appendix 10, earmarked reserves. Estimated balance on earmarked reserves and provisions. 21-22, 116 million. Estimated 22-23, 68. A reduction of 48 million. I note the report, and I note the future that residents will have to operate and have the services that Shropshire Council deliver for them. And it fills me with great apprehension about the future. And I would, as I said, look forward to scrutinising the financial strategy or amended financial strategy when it is presented in July. We do have interesting and challenging times in front of us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Councillor Julia Buckley.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank Councillor Butler for what was quite a realistic introduction to his report, whereas the written report would be another one of these glossy good news productions of this administration bearing no reflection on reality. So we're told that we have a surplus in revenue, but already we'll need 6 times that surplus just to catch up with the inflationary pressures, which is not mentioned in this written report. We're also told quietly by Councillor Butler that the strategy of selling assets to fill our deficits is beyond our control. So this high risk strategy, the only way we can fill the hole, and we have absolutely no control over when we can and can't sell those assets, leaving us high and dry. But what is far worse is where this council does have control. And I do hope that residents are going to be discerning enough to read through this report and see exactly what this administration has chosen to spend its money on, because we should judge this administration on its actions rather than its glossy words. If you'd like to look on page 40, you'll see we've managed to overspend by £2.5 million on the North West Relief Road, the 4 miles of road that nobody wants. And the following sentence reminds us that we've managed to underspend £1.3 million on school 20-mile-an-hour zones and local transport plans. So they have prioritised a road nobody wants, and they have chosen not to help children walk safely to their schools across this county. And the final thing I'd like to draw your attention to is page 16. It's flagged red, the highest possible risk to this council, something we told you about 1 year ago. It says that the closure of Acton Scott Farm 12 months ago has brought about a loss in visitor income of £132,000, exactly what your residents told you would happen. We were told it was a temporary closure and there will be explorations and options going forward to see what to do. It's now a risk to this council, and it's now an overspend. So I'd like to congratulate you on the glossy words, but you will ultimately be judged on your actions. And going forward, I hope that we will change this direction of travel and start putting money in the priorities of our residents.
Councillor David Vasma.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just want to sympathise with Councillor Butler and say that the situation is a very serious one. I was pleased that both in the Cabinet yesterday and today that he seems to be taking that much more seriously than he did before. In previous times, there's been much more cooperation between the different groups on the council over the financial problems we face. Indeed, I think the coffin was taken through the streets of Shrewsbury and down to London at one point in a previous administration, when they were campaigning for more funding. And in the spirit of cooperation, I would like Councillor Butler to consider actually putting forward a campaign, perhaps to a new government, over funding. And because we do get a very bad deal in Shropshire, and I think that it'd be a powerful thing to do, to actually campaign together to achieve a better deal for Shropshire. And I'll be interested in Councillor Butler's response.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan Kerr.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, equally, I'd like to thank the portfolio holder for introducing a bit of realism into the situation. The council's frankly hit the buffers in terms of where it's going on its financial resources. I noticed that the peer review recently used the term perilous to describe the council's financial situation. This paper shows us we reduced our reserves by £8 million over that year. Our current level of general fund reserves is now just 11 million on what is a 200 plus million turnover. So I'd like to ask, it doesn't seem to tell me in the paper, what is the prudent level of general reserves that has been set by the council? So if you can answer that question, would be useful. Looking forward, I think the council now has to protect the vulnerable in the county, and we'll have to abandon some of the more, I have some vanity schemes of investing in acquisition of property which is supposedly going to deliver a return and has systematically failed to do so to date. And of course, issues like the North West Relief Road, which are just way beyond, whatever you think about the merits or demerits of a North West Relief Road, you do have to realise the council is completely exposed to the financial costs thereof, and we can't even run the show without the North West Relief Road. We certainly won't be able to run it with those additional costs. So it's a day of reckoning for the council, but the good news is I think we can get through this, but you will have to focus on statutory responsibilities which have been under-resourced, and if you cap issues like children's services, even though it's a very good service, you can't avoid increasing costs, because the costs of looking after children, as you can see from these papers, are very considerable. So investment is needed there. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillors Dean Carroll, Tony Parsons and Councillor Dan Morris. Councillor Dean Carroll.
Thank you, Speaker. Two things that I want to take issue with. Firstly, the words of Councillor Kerr. As portfolio holder for assets, I really have no idea what he's talking about when he says commercial investments that have failed to deliver a return. I am not aware of any commercial investments that have failed to deliver a return. If he is, I hope he will make me aware of those, as I really should be as portfolio holder. If he is not, perhaps he would reconsider the statement he just made to full council. In terms of Councillor Buckley's former previous comments on the North West Relief Road, Councillor Buckley, you do not speak for my residents who do want the North West Relief Road. You do not speak for many residents in and around Shrewsbury and in towns and villages north of Shrewsbury who are waiting desperately for the North West Relief Road to, are you listening to me, Councillor Buckley? Good, glad to hear it. Waiting for the North West Relief Road to relieve the misery and pressure that is felt by them from traffic that is going through residential roads and country roads that it has no business being on. In terms of, are we prioritising the North West Relief Road over school streets? What an absolutely callous thing to say, which is completely and fundamentally untrue. The North West Relief Road spending from capital budgets, as you know, because we've discussed this in the past at length in scrutiny committees, in cabinet and in full council, is separate to the council's general fund. We've already told you in the past that money that we might save if we wanted to scrap the North West Relief Road, which is what has been proposed by your group in the past, could not then be invested in any other Shropshire council service. It would have to be returned to government. The progress against the 20-mile-an-hour zones outside of schools was updated to cabinet yesterday. The programme has been drawn up. The programme is in place to go this financial year, and I believe all schools streets outside schools that are deemed as suitable for 20-mile-an-hour zones that don't already have them will be in place by the end of the next financial year. And that has nothing to do with the North West Relief Road.
Thank you. Councillor Tony Parsons. And before you speak, Tony, please, members, do try and treat each other with a modicum of respect. When I say modicum, thank you. And I was going to say that infantile playground noises are not particularly welcomed by me in the chair. So all those saying yes, perhaps should question whether they were the ones making that noise. Thank you. Councillor Tony Parsons.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, this county has had financial pressures over a number of years, particularly because of the rurality of this particular authority. Now, we were promised back in 2016 that the government were going to introduce fairer funding for this type of authority. I'd like to ask, where are we insofar as that's concerned 6 years later?
Thank you. Councillor Dan Morris.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to fully associate myself with the comments of Councillor Carroll. The leader of the Labour group is wrong. This administration was returned with 43 seats, standing on a policy of delivering the North West Relief Road, and we fully expect that to simply say that it is not wanted is completely wrong. I would also like to thank Councillor Carroll on his update on the progress of 20-mile-an-hour speed limits outside schools. That was my motion, which was fully supported in this council, and thanks very much for that, Carroll. Dink.
Councillor Ruth Houghton.
Thank you, Chair. I note the under-delivered savings during the year in housing services outlined on page 11, and note that we recently approved, or this council recently approved, a development programme for temporary accommodation. Could the portfolio holder confirm when those developments will take place and the speed at which permanent and temporary accommodation will be delivered in order to address this overspend? Secondly, on page 13, there's an underspend in relating to home to school transport. Many home to school transport providers, particularly in rural areas, are experiencing financial pressures due to the rising cost of fuel. Will this council negotiate new contracts to address these pressures, which is of serious concern in rural areas to both schools and parents? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nigel Harting.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Two queries. The first one is on Appendix 7.7.2 in relation to the loans to Shire Services. It's a slightly worrying paragraph, and I just wonder whether or not the administration can give us some indication about the future viability of Shire Services if we're having difficulty in getting loans back that we've been given. And also in relation to paragraph 9.1 on page 6 in terms of the savings deliveries. It always seems to be the case that we never quite seem to be able to deliver the savings that we're being asked to deliver. And I note that although we've made 62% of those 2021-2022 savings, we're still having difficulty in the appendices in delivering the others. And I'm just wondering whether there is complete confidence that we'll be able to deliver the savings that we set ourselves.
Thank you. Councillor Burley Bentick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to endorse the comments made by Councillor Buckley in relation to the capital budget and question the response from Councillor Dean Carroll. In February of this year, councillors were told that no Shropshire Council monies had been used for the North West Relief Road, although £14.5 million of government money had been spent. However, there is a £2.47 million overspend against the North West Relief Road budget. And so where has this money come from, if not from Shropshire Council reserves? Thank you. The second point is with regard to climate change. I note that the amount of money that Shropshire Council currently devotes to climate change is something like 1/4 of a penny for every pound that's spent by the council in controllable budget. 1/4 of a penny. This is not a commitment to climate change, in my view. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, there we are some of the list. So I'm going to go back to the leader, Councillor Leslie Picton, who seconded and reserved her right.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to pick up on a couple of points that, rather than ask Willem to answer all of them, I can't remember. I think it was Councillor Evans's point about underspends on climate change. It relates actually to the next point I'm going to make, which is in response to Councillor Bentinck. I think the situation is it's money needs to be spent, but money needs to be spent wisely. And in some cases with the climate change, those schemes did not come forward as quickly as possible. Therefore, those monies will be utilised this year. In terms of Councillor Bentinck's comment, the monies that you see in the budget overall are not all the monies that are spent on climate change actions. That is purely the money that is given to the climate change team. So there are two different things. So the 1/4 of a penny is not a correct figure. I'll let Councillor Butler answer some of the specific points, but in terms of the overall situation of the finances with the council, I too would like to congratulate not just the team, the finance team, but I'd actually like to say thank you to the portfolio holders as well, who've worked really, really hard with their finance leads to ensure that they get the best possible budget outcomes for their areas. We are in difficult waters, as Councillor Butler said. It's uncharted waters. Yes, our financial peer review team said that our finances were perilous, and so is every other council's finances perilous. And that brings me on to the matter of fairer funding. There is no doubt that we were promised fairer funding 6 years ago, and at every council meeting I've been to, not just here, but actually at the LGA conference last week, we heard there is a need for fairer funding. Governments have consistently, and I'm not just going to say one government, because governments have consistently failed to fund local government properly. That's a statement I've made a number of times, and I will stand by that statement. However, for our council and my cabinet, finance and resolving our financial situation is our top priority. We will be looking and taking a very hard look at all the services we provide. And Councillor Kerr, you're right. You know, when the going gets tough, the tough get going, and looking at all areas of our budgets. Statutory services are really important. As I've said before, we will be judged on how we look after our most vulnerable. And we look after our most vulnerable extremely well, and long may that continue. Those decisions will be harder for every single council in this country, but I am absolutely confident in not just the team of cabinet members, but also in our team of officers, that there is a very clear way forward for us to resolve our budgetary issues. We're doing something that most councils don't do, or certainly hasn't done in the past, which is to bring forward a refresh of the financial strategy, because we have to take in account inflation. We were told at the LGA conference last week that there will be a 2-year funding settlement. Who knows, she said under her breath. But if there is a 2-year settlement, that would absolutely help us, because at least we will know where we're going. So all I would say to you is that this cabinet and this council knows exactly where it's going in terms of its finances. It's not going to be easy, but we started working on next year's finances before last year's finances had even finished. We know what a serious situation it is. I formally second. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank everybody who's entered into the debate, because in the situation we're in, this is exactly what we need. And I'm sure, Roger, that by bringing forward reviews of the MTFS and medium-term financial strategy on a regular basis, I've only done this portfolio for 14 months, and I've seen it in the past. We're always criticised that the opposition never have enough time to come back. So if we're doing it on a regular basis and drip feeding different things throughout the year, you will have every opportunity to scrutinise it and come back and not have to do everything over Christmas.
which I think will be a lot easier for everybody. I'll try and touch on the answers that I've got the information for. The answers I haven't got the information for, I will ask the officers to put the answers on the members portal as questions asked. Vacancies, Roger. The vacancy figure, it's a really interesting one because we've been running on about 3 to 4% vacancies year on year now for the last 5 or 6 years, and we haven't actually seen any changes in outcomes or services or performance. So we actually think that we've been too cautious on that, and if we reduce that down to say 2.5%, 3%, that's where the 2.6 million of savings will come, and it will be year on year. With the general fund, will be actually improved with the £1.5 million that we've got surplus coming forward. I get your point about earmark reserved, but it's an interesting one because on the one hand we want to go to government and say we need more funding, but we will get criticised if we're just holding on to our reserves and not doing anything with it. So we have to have a balance on what's actually moving forward. Julia, again, it's a historic report on what happened last year. I know Councillor Carroll has had his say on the North West Relief Road. The inflationary pressures are going to be an issue, and I'm being totally honest about that. My view on the North West Relief Road is we desperately need it, A, for the environmental, the amount of queuing traffic around Shrewsbury, for example, and the pollution that's creating, but more importantly, opening up all that land, which will then provide homes for local people to live in, it will provide jobs for local people, and more importantly, that will increase my council tax base and business rate base. How do you think we had that £4 million surplus? Because we delivered over 1,600 new houses. And unless we actually make these economic investments, we won't be able to do that in the future. And as the leader has said, we are not alone on this, but it's interesting to note that the councils that actually had to issue a 114 letter, which basically they've gone bust or done something wrong, are all Labour councils. There we go, never mind. David, totally up for that. I think at our MPs briefing, it's something we can do jointly in talking to the MPs of how we want them to lobby government for the future funding. And I think we need to move away from the view that we may get fairer funding for the rural areas. I think it's how local government is funded, full stop, and what they expect us to do. And I think there's going to be a much greater role for the third level of government, which is our town and parish councils, to move forward in the future, because they have the opportunity to precept as well as we do. Duncan, the general reserves, I'll have to come back to you. Tony, fairer funding, again, I know I sat on the Rural Services Network with Cecilia Motley, and just prior to COVID, we were rubbing our hands together because it was just about to be delivered. And now we've got a £570 billion deficit for how we supported our society through COVID. So again, going back to David's point, there is a huge issue there that we need to influence all our MPs on how this moves forward. Ruth, regarding the temporary accommodation, homeschool transport, I haven't got that information in front of me, but I will raise the issue and come back to you. Nigel, I strongly believe, I think there's a job to be looked at around Shire services, and I think when I bring forward the workforce strategy, I'll also mention Shire services. So yeah, I'd be quite interested in perhaps taking that to scrutiny. Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure you'll be lenient as this is such an important report. I've only got a little bit to go. Delivery of the savings, again, that we were in lockdown as part of that year. I mean, it's easy to forget that we're out of it now, but there has been a lot of that going forward. But believe you me, I don't think there's a single cabinet member who hasn't had a stick on their back from me saying, what are you doing in your portfolio about your savings? So it's a whole cabinet issue. So we're bringing it forward. Environment now, Councillor Bendick, environment now obviously comes under the Shropshire Plan, under healthy environment. And the one thing I would say to all members is it's not always about spending the money, it's about what we do and how we do. Using the car less doesn't cost any money, does it?
You are technically out of time. I will
Okay,
allow you
and
another
that's
30 or
that
so
was my
seconds.
last point, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, well, that's
And I
fine.
thank
Point
you
of
for-
order. You're answering questions put forward
Yeah.
by
Can I
members. so-
raise a point of order?
No. What is it?
Under, the council has been incorrectly advised. The first council to receive and issue a section 114 notice was Conservative controlled Northamptonshire County Council, where commissioners
Yeah,
were
I'm
attempted.
not really
was
sure
incorrect.
that's,
And you said it's only Labour
I'm not sure
authorities
that's
that had
a
received such
point of order,
notice.
Mr.
I'm
Councillor
talking about
Kerr.
the recent one,
Thank you.
Duncan.
Which isn't, so. Okay, thank you. So there are a number of recommendations, A to J. All those in favour, please show. Against? Abstentions? I think that's clearly passed. Very clearly passed, thank you. Move on to item 8, which is the workforce strategy. Just so that members know, because I don't want to go down this route again, a point of order may only be raised if a decision taken is not lawful or protocol is not being followed. Not on because we didn't like what somebody said. Thank you. Item 8, workforce strategy. Again, I invite Councillor Gwilym Butler, portfolio holder for finance and corporate resources, to present the report and move the report be received and agreed. Councillor Butler.
Thank you again, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to present this strategy to council as it's one of the first strategies to sit under our Shropshire plan, and how we transform as an organisation in the future. It will be a vital living document on how we treat our greatest asset, being our staff. I was really pleased how well the strategy was accepted across party at Cabinet recently. I have already asked that any updates in the statistics are broken down to show a clearer picture of the council in certain areas, such as Shire services, especially when we look at the gender pay gap and the demographics, because if you take Shire services out of it, where they have a lot of part-time people, it actually makes the council look a lot better on everything else it does. It is also important that we work closely with everybody involved with the staff, and that is the unions and the staff working bodies that we have set up when we do any negotiations for any changes that we bring forward. And I'm pleased to say that I'm personally meeting with them. There's nothing more for me to say, Leader and Mr. Speaker. This is a good news story, and I move the recommendations 3.1 for the strategy to be adopted. Thank you.
Thank you, and that's seconded by Councillor Rob Gittins, is that correct?
Yes, I'm happy to second and reserve my right. Thank you.
Good. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you. I really welcome the report generally, and the comment from Councillor Butler that he's keen to work in cooperation with trade unions representing the workforce. Under the section of section 9, our workforce priorities, so the focus on how we can attract, recruit and retain our staff, I think that surely must be coming to the fore now as we see the large number of vacancies that we're carrying on the council. And it would be helpful for us just to reflect for a moment on the disparity in some of the pay grades compared to our neighbours. And I know that Unison in particular would be keen for us to move forwards to benchmarking our salaries, particularly in line with national agreements and comparing us with neighbouring authorities. And with your permission, Chairman, I'd like to put forward an amendment that proposes we include that at section 9 on page 18. Could I read out the proposed wording, please?
Okay.
So it currently says on page 18 of the strategy, section 9, our workforce priorities, what we will do. So the third paragraph starts with review and reduce our reliance on the agency and interim workforce. Now, we all know that's the most expensive part of our wage bill. And I would like to suggest we include the words by ensuring that our substantive workforce's pay is benchmarked and terms and conditions are fully aligned to national agreements and in line with neighbouring authorities, and then continue with the previous wording, but where we do require these. So what we're doing is we're just committing, as we usually do, to follow national agreements on pay, but it's that particular reference to ensure that we're aligned with neighbouring authorities. There are some posts where our staff can be paid £4,000 or £5,000 more for the same role at Telford, and we're hemorrhaging. So it's a normal request, fairly reasonable, and I hope it will be accepted as a friendly amendment.
Councillor Butler, I have seen you, Simon. I'll come back to you in a minute, but let's deal with this first. I just wanted to get your opinion on it first before I ask a seconder.
I understand the ethos of what you're saying, Julia, but however, there's a couple of things I'd like to bring to people's attention. If we actually benchmark ourselves with people, so if we actually want to get somebody with particular expertise in, we can't pay them any more than that benchmark. So it actually restricts us from actually paying more than Telford does on certain people. And it actually pushes us into a corner, which I don't want to be pushed into a corner with. You have my, if we can't get the staff we want, we are actually offering more if we need to. And I'm sure that would have to be where the benchmark is or above to actually make any difference whatsoever. And I get the bit about recruitment, but at this stage, I think what the work we are actually doing, and I am doing in apprenticeships, in social work, we're now looking at highways maintenance, the work we're doing with the West Midlands employers around agency staff, and I actually now sit on the board of West Midlands employers, the first time a member of this council has done that. And I'm actually influencing how we do things generally. So I do understand your ethos, but I don't want to be pushed into a corner.
Can I just say thank you very much? I really appreciate that. And I think if we could combine your words with mine, that would be super. So we could say is benchmarked or above. I think that's an excellent compromise.
No, I'm not going to go there.
With all due respect, I'm going to pop in here.
Can I just also say, Chair, it would be awful to change this document now after it has got the agreement of the unions and the staff bodies. So I don't think that would be fair for us to change something that they have already agreed to. So when it's reviewed, that is the time for them to come up with that amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Buckley, do you wish to pursue your amendment? If you do, you will need to get it seconded, then we will need to debate that amendment.
Yes, please. Thank you very much. But I will take Councillor Butler's wording, so I will add in the phrase benchmarked or above. I really welcome his contribution.
Right. And your proposed amendment is seconded by Tony Parsons. Felt he needed to put his hand up.
I'll reserve my right.
Okay. Well, technically, we now debate this. I do understand what the portfolio holder said about this. This paper's been agreed with the unions and everything else. It would seem that some councillors have decided that their input's not full and proper. That said, I can't see any hands up. So we will move straight to, you reserved your right. Is there anything you want to say on the debate you've heard, Councillor Parsons?
Not a lot, no. No, I just think that it is important when we look at, as a former HR man myself, when looking at retention and whatever of staff, that we do have something in there that at least takes a look across areas local to us and make sure that we are competitive with their rates.
Thank you. Julia, is there anything else you want to say? Well, actually, no, I think you don't come back to the proposal, do you? It's just a secondary. Is that correct? Sum up, Julia, yeah.
So I would like to just clarify that this is the position of Unison. They have a national template amendment going to all national councils asking that salaries be benchmarked, that terms and conditions be benchmarked and aligned. So this is not in contradiction, but this is absolutely consolidating the view that you will have heard from the local trade union, which is Unison. So I think that Councillor Butler and myself agree that we want the flexibility to be able to recruit and attract talent to this organisation. We shouldn't be afraid to protect terms and conditions. I can't imagine a single member in this room doesn't want us to follow national conditions on pay. We've all signed up to that. I'm not actually asking you to do anything different. I'm asking us to commit to rules and conditions that are already there. And I think it would go a very long way in retaining our staff at this critical time. Thank you.
Okay, so all those in favour of supporting the amendment, please show. All those against, show. The motion has fallen, so we'll go back to the original debate. I had Councillor Simon Harris who had indicated that he wished to speak.
Yes, thank you,
Mr. Speaker. I just want to congratulate Councillor Butler for including in the strategy the idea of a talent academy. I think it's important that within the context of the council officers that we do identify talent, nurture talent, grow talent, and I would hope that this talent academy is part of that process. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to go back now to the seconder who withheld his right, Councillor Rob Gittins. I've got David. I'm going to go back to, go on quickly. Put your hand up a bit quicker next time before I go back to the second.
Well, it's difficult here on the corner, Chair. Yeah, I just want to say that I'm a bit disappointed with this document because I think it's so thin. And one of my concerns is that the staff who find it difficult to work from home are not given enough support. And I think this strategy ought to be concerned about the possible discrimination against those people who find it very difficult working from home. I know that the Policy Council is to encourage people to do so, but I think more recognition needs to be given to those people who find that very difficult.
Thank you. Councillor Gittins, you reserved your right.
Thank you very much, Chair. I note on page 19 of the workforce strategy and new ways of working, it's really pleasing to see that we regularly undertake staff surveys, making sure that our staff are happy, skilled and healthy must of course be our top priority. Working from home should be, of course, our default way moving forward, but we must also acknowledge that we must take into account people's circumstances. And I know from personal experience that having a 2 or 3 year old toddler running around your feet when you're trying to have a meeting is more than a little bit challenging. So maybe, just floating the idea in the future whether members could possibly be involved in such a survey as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll answer Rob first. I totally agree. It's something that we could put on the agenda for the member working group, because I think as well as looking after our staff, we have to make sure the welfare of members is there as well with working from home and everything else. So thank you for bringing that forward. Do you know what really disappoints me? When this paper went to Cabinet, it was generally well received and everybody was happy. And now that we're in full council, people see the opportunity for grandstanding. Yeah, and I actually think in the environment that we're working in, all you're doing is just remember this document has been approved by your staff. OK, and you actually want to go against it. I actually find that quite hard to deal with. It's been through their staff advisory bodies, it's been through the unions, and all you want to do is find faults for a bit of grandstanding. Well, I think the sensible members in this chamber will actually vote to accept this report and strategy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. OK, it has been proposed and seconded. There is a recommendation at 3.1. All those in favour, please show. Any against? Abstentions? 2 abstentions, 3 abstentions. So almost unanimous, but not quite. OK. Thank you. We'll move on to item 9, which is the report of the PMSC Read Climate Change and Ecology Bill Task and Finish Group. I invite Councillor Claire Wild, the chair of the Performance Management Scrutiny Committee, to present the report and move that the report be received and agreed. Councillor Wild.
Thank you very much, Claire Wild, Councillor for the Severn Valley. I'm just going to move the report and reserve my right to come back. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's seconded by Councillor Barrow. Councillor Kerr, I saw your finger going up to second, I presume.
I think it's already been seconded, I think. Too late. I'd like to welcome and thank Councillor Wild and the members of this Task and Finish Group The only curious thing is some of the comments around the National Citizens Panel. One of the arguments against the panel, it seems to be that it might distract from the broader aims of the bill, not too sure about that, and make it less palatable to some members of Parliament. I found them quite amazed by that statement, that any member of Parliament would be threatened by the findings of a National Citizens Panel. But there is, but obviously that issue remains between us, but broadly on all the other elements, I welcome this and I thank the work of the Task and Finish Group.
Thank you. Caroline, Rosemary Dartnell.
Thank you. I'm pleased this council, along with more than 190 other authorities, proposes to support the Westminster Cross-Party Bill that recognises the twin crises of the climate emergency and the biodiversity crisis, seeks to fortify our response with greater effort to mitigate. Importantly, the bill requires authorities to halt and reverse the degradation of nature in our country. And finally, bring the UK into compliance with the UN's Convention on Biodiversity. It's a pity that this proposal does not extend support to the creation of a National Citizens' Assembly, as such a body would bring renewed vigour and wider participation as appropriate to such a critical aspect of policy. However, the CEE bill is ultimately a matter for Westminster once some sort of business there resumes.
Thank you. I haven't got anybody else, so I'm going to go back to Councillor Barrow. Councillor Barrow, as a seconder, did you have anything you wish to say?
No, there's nothing I wish to say. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Wild, anything you wish to add?
Yes, thank you very much indeed. I'd like to thank Councillor Dean Carroll for being the first portfolio holder for climate change, because he set in motion a huge step change for the whole of this council. I'd also like to thank Councillor Ian Nellins for his commitment and hard work in everything we do at this council. And finally, I'd like to thank the leader, because obviously the leader is in charge of everything and she has a very strong commitment to climate change. So thank you, everybody, and let's hope we can make a difference.
Good, thank you. It's been proposed and seconded. There is a recommendation at 3.1. All those in favour, please show. Any against? Abstentions? Unanimous. Thank you, councillors, as I thought it would be. We will move on to item 10, which is the annual report of the portfolio holder for digital data and insight and built housing. Can I remind everybody that portfolio responses are for information only. Questions may be put to the portfolio holder on the work they're undertaking, but there's no decisions are taken on these items. No motions are to be put. Councillor Gittins.
Thank you very much, Chair. The past year has seen the council lay the foundations of a future target operating model, including a digital first day approach, digital county and a digital strategy. The launch of the digital strategy later this year will help pull a number of strands currently in development. The council's developing target operating model includes a programme of works under the title Digital County. Within the Digital County programme, the council can apply a digital first approach, taking into account the following: digital in infrastructure, the Shropshire Deal, a offer to Shropshire residents about how they can expect to transact and interact with the council, in internal efficiencies to reduce bureaucracy, and an increase in the use and availability of the end-to-end systems and information. A series of green papers have been developed to enable a digital first approach and consider the implications of implementation. These will of course go to scrutiny. Superfast broadband coverage of the Shropshire Council area in 2014 was at 24%, with current coverage now standing at 98.44%. Shropshire Council is the best performing local authority in the country in terms of access for the delivery of superfast broadband in the rural areas. And I firmly believe this is down to us having the best team in the country. The Connecting Shropshire team are hard-working, highly motivated and highly successful. And coverage is projected to rise to 99% by the end of Airband's contract deployment, due to finish at the end of the year. This has been a fantastic achievement in a geographically challenging area where most suppliers simply don't want to find delivery commercially viable. We also continue to work with our partners, such as the Department of Digital, Culture and Media, to improve mobile phone coverage. But as a council, we still have a very limited influence in this area as it's commercially driven. But we will always strive to keep the lines of communications open, challenge when necessary, and take every opportunity to level up Shropshire in this area. I would like to also take the opportunity to highlight and praise the great work that the council's IT team have undertaken over the past year and beyond, especially during COVID, when there was a major step change in the way that we all work. Moving from the office to working from home was something that was done seamlessly and overnight when lockdown began. This presented major challenges for the council, especially with the new way of working, and the ICT team especially excelled in making this possible. Recently, due to the conflict in Ukraine, new challenges have arisen, certainly around cybersecurity, where we are seeing a dramatic increase in cyber attacks from both Russia and China. And again, the council has risen to the challenge, especially our colleagues in the council's ICT security team who've worked day and night to keep the council safe. I'm pleased to see that the majority of staff and members have now completed their cybersecurity training, but sadly 10 members have not. Can I urgently encourage those members who've not completed their cybersecurity training to do so ASAP, as I wouldn't want those members to have their IT access restricted. If you need help with this, please do not hesitate to contact either our wonderful IT team or myself to arrange any support. Finally, our Customer Services Centre has had a number of achievements over the past year, including the introduction of Fix My Street, supporting ordering and distribution of the third bin, and the growth of the Shropshire local offer, which has added Ludlow alongside Shrewsbury as its main contact points, whilst the new mobile offer covering the county's main towns is now running. Lastly, I'd like to thank officers for their help in pulling together this report. Thank you.
Very much. Right, I do have 2 or 3 people that have indicated. I just want to remind members that this is for questions of the portfolio holder on their work they're undertaking and not for sort of general comments about how good or bad they think it is. So I've got Councillor Heather Kidd, Councillor Parry and Councillor Harting. Councillor Kidd.
I have several questions on the paper. I must say that it's a useful document, and I thank Rob for presenting this. There are a number of areas where I'd just like some more detail. Those include, under the superfast broadband, would it be possible for us to have a mapping system so that we can actually see which areas still need to be rolled out, to where there are not spots, where there are still problems? Because since we're rolling it out so well, we ought to know those areas where we do have hiccups still. And I know that there are some in my patch and others, and it may help us to target work on it. So if we could have that, I'd be great. Could we also have refreshed information being sent to the public about those schemes that are available to them? Because they were launched and so on, but they disappear into history. And so if we can start that again, that would be great, so that we pick up as many people as possible. It would also refresh local members, I think. On top of that, the 5G rollout and so on, West Mercia Rural 5G, can I just remind people if there are still areas with not spots where we don't get any at all? Can we increase pressure as well, please, on government to make sure we have mask sharing so that those places where people have taken the best possible mobile phone company for their area can continue to get that when they move into another area? And that's something that actually government was trying to do, but I think we need to reinforce that, whoever's in charge of that at this present moment. The 4G signal is also intermittent in some areas still, so we need to do some work around increasing the reliability of that 4G. And it's really important, this, for the rollout of social care and health services and so on, because many things now rely on that digital access. So I would also like to remind this council that there are many people, and I've talked about this during the lockdowns out there, who are still not able to use smartphones properly, the digital networks properly. And if we can find ways and means of actually supporting them and training them through that, it's really important. And it's something that people are actually quite bashful about in many cases because they've been left behind. But for so many of our services now, we require people in the first instance to be able to use the internet or a smartphone. So I don't know where we can find that, but there should be mechanisms to be able to deliver that with some funding to do that. And one last thing, the IT team, and Leslie will be aware of this because I've told her several times. The IT team are great. If I have a problem, they're really good. I am not actually going to criticise. What I am saying is I'm trying desperately here to try and find pages when people are talking about in the financial strategy Appendix 7, and I'm rolling through the pages trying to find it, and that is why I have to have paper, because I can find it in the paper very much more quickly than I can online. So please, can we find a better way of finding and searching for something that somebody is talking about so that we can take a sensible part in debate? And it's nothing new, but I needed to put it in the public domain. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Parry.
I'd like to say that my superfast broadband in Ludlow is great, but I can't do that. I'm not even connected. We have a firm called Openreach who are supposed to be putting all of Ludlow onto superfast broadband. We find that yes, the centre of the town is on it, but the outskirts of the town, we have the wires are on the poles. If you've got poles, we can't get the poles. I'm being told.
Can you get to the question? I don't.
Yes, my question is, would this council please do something about it? Because I had a gentleman who I got in touch with the council who had a pole put in the middle of his driveway, which he had to put up with for 18 months. Now, if you come home from work and find that someone has put a pole in the middle of your driveway and you can't get in, that was awful. I tried to do something with the council and was informed that it's nothing to do with us. You have to go through Openreach.
And that's exactly what I've had when it's happened to me.
But the main thing is I have got lots of small businesses who are complaining to me. I thought it was my system.
Right, Viv, please. We need the question, not a rundown on complete services in Ludlow. And I understand why you're frustrated.
You know, I mean, I've been in hospital a long time, and to come home and find that I can't even get on a Zoom meeting because it keeps going in and out all the time. Please, can this council do something about it?
Yeah, I think
Openreach are very good, but they don't take any notice.
All right, I think that question has been very well asked. Thank you, Vic. Thank you. Councillor Bagnall.
Thank you very much. Can I just echo the words of Councillor Kidd about the fact that not all of our constituents have access or easy access to the internet or smartphones and so on. My comment was really about the Fix My Street app, which obviously I welcome a sort of one-stop shop for reporting issues to do with the highways and so on. However, I do wonder whether it might be possible to have slightly more detailed feedback, because when you report an issue, sometimes you get a response and it says it's closed, it's dealt with, but actually that doesn't always mean that the situation has been resolved. It means that it's been passed on to the appropriate department for dealing with. As the local councillor, I get a lot of people contacting me, asking me to report various issues, which I'm happy to do because, as I say, they may not have access to the internet, they may not be sufficiently confident to do so for themselves. But if I'm reporting, I need to have something that I can go back to my constituents with, rather than yes, it's sorted, when clearly, it's not. I do appreciate that it's early days with Fix My Street, and there are changes and improvements to be made. But can I ask that one of the changes that is made is for more detailed information, possibly with a completion date or a proposed date for completion for the work. I'm not expecting them to say next Tuesday at 3 o'clock, but if they could say it's in the spring programme for work, or the autumn programme, I think that would be very helpful for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gittins, you've had a few questions there and a fairly good description of internet services in the south of the county. So your response, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I will try my best to rattle through all of those questions. Councillor Kidd, superfast broadband map. There is actually a superfast broadband map. I will get the team to email a link out to all members with that, so you can have a look for yourselves. Also, I think you mentioned about sort of a scheme for the public and a briefing for members. Yes, of course, I'm happy to organise that. In regards to sort of 5G, 4G, general mobile phone coverage, there is a scheme, I believe BTEE are undertaking down there in the southwest. Unfortunately, I can't go into any more detail than that because it's commercially sensitive at this time. You did mention around. You did mention something sort of around digital inequality. A lot of that work will be coming through in our digital strategy. So when that is launched and goes through scrutiny, that will be a great time to have a look at that. I think your last point was just in regards to sort of being able to access data on the laptop. Yes, I mean, we have had those conversations. We will continue to have those conversations. I will continue to bring that up with the IT department to see if there is a better way members can find things. So yeah, leave that one with me. Councillor Parry, although I can't really comment on individual cases, if you would like to email either myself or the Connecting Shropshire team, we will do whatever we can to help with that. Councillor Bagnall, yeah, I think you're basically mentioning about the Fix My Street app and certain elements of it not updating or not receiving those updates. Yes, I will continue to work with Councillor Carroll in making sure that in future we can find a way of getting further updates and more updates to to basically sync with the app and the new system. All I'd say is, this is sort of version 1 of Fix My Street. This is a ongoing project, and we will look to improve it at every opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. No, we don't need to take a vote on that because it's for noting. So we will move on to item 11, which is amendments to the Constitution. I move that the report and recommendations of the Assistant Director of Legal Governance be received and agreed. I understand these are a few technical amendments, which has been previously agreed with group leaders. Brian, are you seconding that?
Yes, I will second that motion.
Okay, all those in favour? Any against amendments? That's unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Obviously, item 13, because Viv is here. Oh, sorry, 12. Yeah, I missed that one. I crossed the wrong one out. Allocation of committee seats and appointments. I move the report and recommendation of the Assistant Director of Legal and Governance be received and agreed.
I second that report.
Right, Councillor Basma.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Obviously, you'd expect me not to be happy about losing a seat effectively compared to our representation after the last set of local elections. But there is a problem here in terms of the way in which it's calculated, and that politically sensitive committees are mixed in with those which have special responsibilities, regulatory responsibilities, and are no way party political, and judge things on the merits presented to them. So I'm giving notice really that I would like to raise at a future meeting of group leaders, or maybe the Constitution Working Group, that we look at the possibility of rearranging the way in which committees are allocated, and to exclude those which are regulatory in nature from the calculations that take place.
I'm sure that's been noted. Up at a future group leaders meeting. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, sorry if I can just kind of, Councillor Vazimir, you'll be aware that we're just about to go through a boundary review situation where we have to look at the makeup of council going forward. So that would be part of the conversation that we would have as group leaders anyway.
All right. Thank you. Okay, all those in favour, please show. Against? If you can't vote twice. That's 4 against. Any amendments? Yeah, I know, don't worry. Amendments? No, sorry, amendments. Abstentions, yeah. Okay, good, that's clearly passed. We will now move on to item 13. I think we can strike that from the list because Viv is very clearly here, and it's very nice to see her on the road to recovery. You're very welcome. So, good. Yes, we're aware of that. Good. Yeah. All right. Well, it's good to see you, Viv. Good. Okay, we'll move on to item 14, which is notices of motion. The following motions have been received in accordance with Procedure Rule 16. The following motion has been received from Councillor Rob Gittins and is supported by Councillors Roy Oldcroft, Dean Carroll, Paul Gill and Paul Wynne. So I know that there is an amendment on it, but I will bring in Councillor Gittins first of all to propose it. We'll get it seconded, then we'll move on to the amendment. Okay. Councillor Gittins.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. The A41 is a major trunk road linking Birmingham to Birkenhead. A portion of the A41 runs through North Shropshire from Hinstock to Whitchurch. The road takes a lot of very heavy traffic from HGVs to agricultural equipment. Car and motorbike traffic tends to get caught up behind the larger and slower vehicles. This then causes drivers to become impatient and take on more risk, especially when overtaking. Coupled with hidden junctions with poor visibility, worn out signage and lines, with road users regularly exceeding the speed limit, The A41 has now become somewhat of a death trap, seeing well over 85 accidents in the last 5 years on only a 16-mile stretch of road. Also, when there is an accident, traffic is diverted down unsuitable C and U roads, causing mayhem within those settlements. This is something that also needs to be looked into. From time to time, accidents or road closures on the M6 cause a dramatic increase in traffic on the A41, exacerbating an already precarious and unsafe situation. Urgent action is now needed to cut down the number of accidents and preserve life. I would also like to draw members' attention to part 4 of the motion around data sharing with the emergency services. I personally feel it's pretty bonkers that the council only receives KSI data once every 3 years from the emergency services. We then take a quarterly average, which creates a pretty warped view of what's actually happening on our roads. Surely in the 21st century, we should be receiving real-time data on a data sharing agreement, so that the council is best placed to make highly efficient and effective decisions around road safety, even on a limited highways budget. I hope the council is willing to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, thank you very much. Who is actually formally seconding it? I've got a list of councillors who support it, but I need one to formally second. Councillor Paul Wynne, thank you very much. It's okay. And I take it you're going to reserve your right? Okay. Okay, I understand that there is an amendment proposed. Councillor Vasman.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to propose an amendment that we adopt the Vision Zero Z element to this. I'm just looking at my papers. Sorry. The Vision Zero. This is a way of dealing with problems we have on our roads, particularly those where the casualties are very high. We have high levels of inactivity and poor health, poor air quality and rising carbon emissions. Now, the Vision Zero is what it does. It takes account of these particular approaches and to make our roads safer. They're looking at safety, looking at road traffic systems that should take account of the fact that people make mistakes and should minimise both the opportunity of error and the harm done when they do occur. It looks at ethics, at the human life and the health that they should have the highest priority. It looks at responsibility. We must all be ready to change to achieve a safe environment on our roads, and there is a particular responsibility for change and reduction of danger amongst those modes of travel create to the highest levels of risk. And it looks at active travel. The Vision Zero approach must enable healthy, clean forms of transport, such as cycling and walking. The key element of this really is that really, as well as making road improvements, we need to actually look at our roads and make sure that the policies we are adopting are actually encouraging people to use active forms of travel, that they're actually reducing the dangers on our roads. For example, introducing 20-mile speed limits, for example. These measures together would help to make our roads much safer and deal with some of the issues, not all the issues highlighted in this motion, of course, but would deal with some of the problems we have on our roads where far too many people are either killed or have serious injuries as a result of accidents. And these problems long term is that these figures have been creeping up in recent years, and we really must do something to tackle the problems of injuries and deaths on our roads. And this Vision Zero approach is a way of doing that. I've moved the amendment.
Good. And Nigel, you put your finger up. Was that to second or to speak?
No, to speak if I can.
All right. Well, we need a seconder first then.
Well, all right, I'll second it then.
There you go. You see, I was right. Okay, you're reserving your right. You're going to speak now.
Reserve my right.
You're reserving your right.
Yeah.
Turn your microphone off then, please. Thank you very much. Councillor Parry.
I'd like to support this motion actually, because
in different areas, we do have awful problems. On the A49, we have several places where we haven't had many deaths. I have been supporting an issue at the Solway Arms for 20 years now to try and get a roundabout there. I'm being told by Highways England just recently that we do not have as many deaths as what we make out we've got, or incidents. It is quite frustrating that we don't have the reports come through to back us up in any way. I am being supported by what I call my representatives in Hereford. There were two of them who are on Hereford Council, and we know that there's many incidents at this one junction. So I would like to support any way that we could get more information that will back anything that we really would like to have, especially to save people's lives. If you want to have somebody like a gentleman we had who came round the corner at Solway Arms, and because there was diesel all over the road, he slid straight underneath a lorry that was coming the other way. What do you say to his family what do you say when they say we cannot have a roundabout there because we haven't got enough deaths? And that is in the last 12 months.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Dan Morris.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to be voting against the amendment. Councillor Gittins is a fantastic proponent of road safety along the A41. And whilst I accept the points made by the Lib Dem group, they are all very, very valid. This specific motion is about looking specifically at the A41. And if this gets swept up in a wider motion about road safety in Shropshire, the specific focus which Councillor Gittins quite rightly is bringing to the stretch of road, it may well be lost. Like I say, I think the Vision Zero strategy is possibly quite a good one and something that the council may want to look at future. But this motion is specifically about the A41, and I think that's where it should be kept. Thank you.
Okay, nobody else, so we will move to the. Oh, Nigel, yes, you did reserve your right. Sorry.
Yes, thank you. I mean, I hear what's just been said, but I really can't see why there is any reason not to adopt the Vision Zero. Just because this particular motion is focusing on the A41, we have difficulties across a range of highways across Shropshire for which the Vision Zero strategy would be very helpful. And if we can put it in place now, we're likely to save more lives in the future. So I would urge you please to vote for the amendment.
Okay. Rob, you do have the right to respond to the proposed amendment before we move to the vote. So
thank you very much. Just to say that, well, there's far too little information on what exactly is entailed with the Vision Zero, and it's not clear from either this amendment or the Vision Zero network website. We all support safer roads, but we need to understand exactly what this is asking for. Let's look at this outside of this motion, but not as a part of this motion. Thank you.
Okay, it's been proposed and seconded. We're voting on the motion. All those in favour, please show. Amendment, sorry, yeah. I thought I'd slip it under the wire quickly. Okay, all those against, please show. Okay, that amendment has clearly fallen, so we will move back to the original motion. I think a lot's been said already, but I have got Hartin, I've got Ken Pardy, and okay, keep your hands up and I'll get it down because suddenly a whole wealth of hands went up. Councillor Hartin.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It's in relation, I suppose, to the first point on the motion, which is the commissioning of a report. And obviously welcome. I think that's something that we should be doing, as we supported it with our amendment. But I'm conscious that sometimes these things can take a long time, and I'm reminded, I suppose, about the time that it's taken to get the information back on the motion passed by Council a few years ago, I think promoted by Councillor Morris, about the 20-mile-an-hour school limit outside schools. I know we've had an update earlier on from Councillor Carroll, but as far as I'm aware, we still haven't got any clear indication of how many schemes have been delivered or started since the motion was passed by Council, apart from the one in London Colon, which of course is part of the school street scheme in any case, so not part of the original motion. So I'm just wondering whether or not we can have some indication from Councillor Gittings as to how long the support would take to come through.
Thank you. Councillor Kevin Pardee.
Thank you, Chair. I wholeheartedly support this motion, but as a person who hails from Market Drayton, I understand the concerns of Councillor Gittings, but I do question the method in which this has come to our attention. Why has the normal procedure not been followed? And is it expected? Sorry, excuse me. As is expected of the rest of us, does this not set a precedent? There is a question of fairness here. There are so many roads in Shropshire that require this sort of attention. There's the A53, there's the A5, and there's the A49 throughout. We could all make an argument for this sort of motion, similar to this motion. Some of us remember David Lloyd. Sorry, there's a question of fairness here, and some of us remember David Lloyd and Councillor Robert Macy receiving a vote of no confidence from their parish council because of a lack of action in rectifying what was thought to be a dangerous road bend. After the vote of no confidence, work began and was finished within 2 months. And of course, beg your pardon, Chairman, and of course, most of us remember the laying of a tarmac along a lane road adjacent to the Chair's residence at a ridiculous cost. This was at a time when councillors were told that only roadworks would be in the case of safety. So I do support this motion, and I do ask that I do wonder why it's gone through this procedure. I don't understand this at all. So thank you very much. Not very well said, but sorry.
Councillor Heather Kidd. Yeah, your name's Heather Kidd, I think.
I didn't hear you.
All right.
It's obviously
Heather Kidd.
a fault on my hearing. Thank you, Speaker, for your attention. I also am concerned that this is just on one particular road, which is about North Shropshire alone, and the implications behind that. I support it. I think it needs to be looked at, but actually we have other roads that the Highways Agency need also to look at in some detail. So I do want the portfolio holder who is named in this particular motion, and Rob Gittings, to take this away, please, and look at those other roads. The A49 in particular is a death trap and has been for many years. We have deaths not only in Viv's patch, but also in Church Stretton and in many other places. So if we are going to start bringing motions to this council about particular roads, the fairness item that Kevin Pardee has just raised is an important issue around that, and we do need to look at much more than just this one. And we do need to look at what we are doing within council to make road safety better. Actually, the deaths on roads are much higher on our country lanes than they are anywhere else, and that's statistically true across the country. The country lanes, the smaller roads, actually have far more injuries and accidents. So if we can, I will vote for this, but we need now to do some work on widening it and making it fairer with both the Highways Agency and our own road safety. Thank you.
Councillor David Vasma.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I support very much the comments of Councillor Pardee and Kidd. I think I do worry about this. I support it. I do worry about it, and I do worry about Councillor Carroll, who has ambitions outside this chamber, putting forward a motion which instructing him to do something. I do think that perhaps we should, these sort of motions really shouldn't be coming here. We should be, these sort of issues should be taken up elsewhere.
Councillor Bernie Bentinck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will also be supporting this motion, and I share the concerns of the previous three speakers in that this is a single road which is being brought before this council, preferentially in respect of the needs of other roads in the county. In my own ward, the Meal Traffic Group has been meeting for over 2 years and trying to lobby Shropshire Council's Highways Department to take the situation seriously, including a traffic petition that was presented to this council in January 2021, and from which a task and finish group was supposed to meet. Over a year later, this is still not met. And so I'm asking when this will meet and if there can be some fairness in relation to the items brought before this council. With regards to the roads in and around the 2 secondary schools in Meal, the portfolio holder has been involved in discussions about trying to improve safety. There are 3 accidents every single term in and around those roads in proximity to those 2 schools. And indeed, there was an agreed proposal to put in vehicle activated signs on Bank Farm Road in the Meal area. And this has still not happened, despite assurances that it would be so. And so I too call for some fairness in the items being brought before this council, and a plea, please, to get a move on with regard to the serious traffic issues in the Meal ward. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Dartnell.
Thank you. I fully support the subject matter of this motion, of course, but I genuinely question the manner of proposing it. And I note the portfolio holder supports the motion. So does this mean that all 74 members must now put motions in a similar manner to draw attention to the notable road safety issues within their own divisions? I mean, I've got many. I've fed them into every single thing that I can feed them into, LTP4, for example, which maybe one day we'll see. And it's a genuine question about that we will have a lot of motions if that is the case. And I'd also just like to say to Councillor Bentinck that the road safety task and finish group has met, because I am on the committee. We've only met once, but we have met.
Thank you. Councillor Dean Carroll.
Thank you, Speaker. I didn't expect that this would garner the response it has, to be honest. I thought it was quite a straightforward motion. I think from my point of view, and I accept that I believe that this motion was asking for council corporately, i.e. leader and chief executive, to carry out a lobbying, but I can accept that it actually appears that I'm asking myself to do something which probably isn't in hindsight what I would have done. But in terms of why we're here and not somewhere else, I think that the key is certainly resolutions 2, 3 and 4, which are asking the council to lobby, which is normally something, as far as I'm aware, that we bring to full council to ask council to lobby or write to outside agencies. And in terms of road safety, I'm completely committed to improving road safety, both on our strategic roads network, on our unclassified sea and unclassified rural road network, and on our urban roads network. Councillor Bentinck, yes, I believe that there's a programme for Radbrook green area that is in process. I regret the illness kept me away from your meeting on Monday evening, but as far as I'm aware, there is a programme in process, and I believe it's been taken forward as one of the 3 priority areas the officers are working on. So if it's not moving forward, then let me know. But I really don't think that it warrants the reaction it has garnered. But as I say, with hindsight, perhaps my name affixed to it wasn't the wisest move, as it appears that I'm asking myself for something. But I don't think that should take away from the importance of the subject area, or the fact that we're not just asking ourselves to do something, we're actually asking council to lobby outside agencies. So I don't see personally an issue with it.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Williams. Maiden speech.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow on from something that Councillor Bentinck said to do with the schools. The primary school in my division was promised back in 2017 that it would have various traffic calming measures and 20-mile-an-hour speed limit put in. And I know that at that point, Idsall School needed some emergency work doing to a corner to prevent buses from squashing children. However, after doing that emergency work, they never returned to Highley. So it's now 5 years that we've been waiting for our traffic calming measures around our primary school, and it's just getting busier as Highley gets bigger. So I just wanted to ask whether there is, I believe, a group working on all sorts of things to do with around primary schools and around schools in general, an update on when that information will become available.
Thank you. I've got Dan Morris, and then I'm going to bring in David Evans, and then I'm going to draw a line under it, because I think, everyone's starting off by saying they, broadly support the motion, and then we hear the debate that's going on behind it. But I think we'll have heard just about everything we need to hear by then. So Councillor Dan Morris, and then David Evans, and then I'm going to move to summing up and vote.
Thank you, Chair. There are many different ways that councillors can raise road safety issues. For instance, I arranged a meeting with the Police and Crime Commissioner, Highways England, and Kia when I came across road safety issues on the A49. So it doesn't have to be just through here. It's just simply that Councillor Gittins has chose to raise it through here, and I think he should be congratulated for looking after the people in his constituency. Thank you.
Thank you. That's David Evans.
Yeah, we heard a lot about the A49 this afternoon, or this morning, and there's a lot of work being carried out on the A49, because if you've noticed, the A49 has been closed for weeks at night, starting at 8 o'clock at night till 6 o'clock in the morning. And for those who hasn't observed driving down the A49, if you look at every road junction, there's been reflector signs put in. There's been red paint put down the middle of the road with white lining on it. And this is all to improve the safety of the A49. I've had a lot of work with Highways England, just as Dan Morris has, and it's really paid off. So I think we'll wait and see what happens on the A49, but I think part of it needs driver education. Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Paul Wynne seconded, reserved. Paul, do you want to say anything? Or?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to say, I thought it was very straightforward. This piece of road is one of the most dangerous pieces of road in Shropshire, and it does need updating. We have been working on it 4 or 5 years now, having subcommittees, etc. We've had the police, we've had all sorts of things out there, having meetings. We want to move on with this. This is an extremely dangerous bit of road. Then we go off about the schools and 20-mile-an-hour zone and speed limits. It's 13 miles, there isn't a school on that main road. This is what is. So you don't know the road. I do. Most of it's through my patch. There aren't any schools on there, so we keep harking about it. Can we just get on with it? I thought it was quite straightforward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gittins.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just very quickly on a couple of points that were raised. Personally, my parish councils are 100% behind me. I'm aware parish councils in neighbouring divisions are all also behind their local councillor and in general the A41 safety campaign. Just in regards to Councillor Dartnell's point, this isn't just a divisional issue, it is a regional issue. It affects not only the Cheswardine division, it affects the Hodler division, it affects the Priest division, it affects both the divisions, perhaps up in Whitchurch. It has knock-on effects for the divisions in Market Drayton too. So I think the fact that some members are raising it as a purely divisional issue is not actually correct. It should be highlighted as more of a regional issue within the county. Thank you.
Okay, we have the motion. We've had a good long debate with the amendment. All those in favour of supporting, please show. Just in case, anybody against? No abstentions. That was unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Now, it is my intention that between 1 and 1:30, depending on where we are on an agenda item, as requested by Julia Buckley, that we stop for lunch. There is no canteen, so I hope you've all brought some lunch with you. Obviously, if we're 10 minutes from finishing, we'll probably crack on, but that will be your decision. So for those of you now, it's 12 o'clock now. I propose to go on for another hour, 15 minutes, and then we'll break for 20 minutes. All right. So the second motion has been received from Councillor Duncan Kerr and is supported by the Green Group. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Chairman. So I'll ask members to try and consider this on its merits and be impartial about it. So let's just return to a few basic points. The council adopted LTN 120 as part of its commitment to active transport. That lays down new standards for cycling and walking provision. These are new minimum standards. Oswestry is Shropshire's second town. The route we're talking about is the route from every property in Oswestry to what will be the major centre of employment for Oswestry. I say it's the route. It's not a route. It's not even the main route. It's the only route. Only route available. Quite uniquely. Potentially one of the most well-used and active transport routes in the country. Unlike any other areas where we try to improve cycling provision, there are no physical constraints. Often you're working with an existing highway and the physical constraints, size of the highway precludes or makes it very difficult to get compliance. There are no such barriers here. If this route is exempted, the council will find it seriously difficult to impose these standards on any other developers because they will claim that they can't comply if the council can't comply. And the Department of Transport has made it very clear in its letter that active transport funding will only go to those councils who comply with LTN 120, not only in the applications they make, but in all their other activities. And so the council will be effectively ruling itself out of receipt of such funding in the future. A lot of weight has been put on forecasts of future cycle travel, but people seem to have forgotten that what we're trying to do is a modal shift. A modal shift in Shropshire Council's travelling of people, and the government is committed to this. We are committed to this, and we need it to achieve our reductions in carbon emissions. We need to plan for the future, not the past or even the present. Well, look at a county, and we all know about this, a county that's been successful in cycling. It was Holland. Holland didn't get there by planning when their roads were gridlocked, because in the 70s, Holland wasn't the country you see now. It had gridlocked roads. They planned the infrastructure, knowing that when they put the infrastructure in, cycle use will increase. So those projections based on current use or projections about future use are just not a robust means of moving forward, which is why the government introduced LTN 120 in the first place. Cost of compliance is put around 1 to 2 million. For members who may not know Oswestry as well as some of us do, over £8 million was spent on the Mile End roundabout a little over 10 years ago. That was then deemed to be not fit for purpose. and a further £17 million has just been spent on another redesign. So that's around £26 million that's been spent for road traffic on that roundabout alone, the same route. So we're asking for a fraction of that, somewhere between a 13th and a 26th, to make this route compliant with LTN 120. In conclusion, if it is built as designed, this cycle bridge will be a folly, an unused folly. Unusable, ugly, and a monument to the council's failure to adopt active transport. In fact, the council is in denial about the modal shift that we need to see. All of this could and should have been avoided if the cabinet members had talked to either Oswestry Town Council or indeed Oswestry Bid on these proposals. Both those organisations had never been consulted on the design for this bridge. Oswestry Town Council remains willing to assist if it can, but we are urging members to now think again. For the future, don't end up with a folly which is both going to be of no benefit to anybody in Oswestry or North Shropshire, but could actually preclude investment coming into the county in the future.
Thank you. And is that seconded by Councillor Mike Isherwood?
Seconded, thank you.
Are you reserving your right?
I will reserve my right, thank you.
Okay. Yep, and then Rosemary afterwards. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Just I thought I've been in communication with Councillor Kerr about this because I'd spotted an article in the press, and I know he's had various email correspondence with officers. Much of this is, although around active travel, but also around the Innovation Park and economic growth for the Oswestry area. I just wanted to highlight some of the additional impacts on the project that these changes could have. The possible loss of the remaining HIF grants, which is 634,000, which is linked to the current fabrication timescale of the bridge. Significant abortive work costs in terms of design and fabrication works already undertaken, which amount to £1.3 million already spent. Significant budget pressure, circa 2 to 3 million, to be secured from grants or additional borrowing pressures not factored into the medium-term financial plan should changes be made. Overall delay incurring further inflationary budget pressures on the wider scheme, so we know around the inflationary costs around, particularly around steel and construction. Additional design costs to redesign the bridge, additional planning fees. This has been through the planning process and was approved. And the timeframes and the outputs for this for us to move forward with the project and get the Oswestry Innovation Park moving forward at pace to deliver that economic growth and development in the area. The LTN 120 is guidance, and of course much of this work was done before that was adopted. I appreciate what you're saying, but where we are at this moment in time with this bridge, we've considered options, but we are where we are, and it would be not financially prudent to accept this motion today. And our intention is to move forward, and I hope members of council will support that.
Councillor Dartnell.
Thank you very much. I note the comments of Councillor Cooper that the idea of financial prudence in this regard, but I'd say that the idea of LTN 120, which the council has accepted, is about improving infrastructure to provide safe carriageways for active travel, with the underlying aim of encouraging those who do not already cycle or walk their journeys to do so with confidence in safety and convenience. It's pointless to adopt such a resolution and leave it in a policy cul-de-sac. Adopting new policy that is designed to bring about a modal shift in transport requires the council to bring that new policy into the heart of infrastructure design, including ongoing developments. Designing a bridge that requires cyclists to dismount repeatedly just to cross a single road implies a lack of understanding of cycling. All new Shropshire infrastructure must comply with LTN 120, as does the recently constructed bridge in Craven Arms that features a ramp. I urge members to support this motion because building infrastructure that is not compliant with current standards is poor use of public money.
Okay, well, I'm going to go back to the seconder who reserved. Councillor Isherwood.
Thank you. Not much to add to what Councillor Kerr has already said, but just to state the obvious, we are in the third decade of the 21st century. Infrastructure of this importance should be compliant with the latest guidance adopted by Council in both letter and spirit. It should be inconceivable to do otherwise for reasons of health, accessibility, fuel saving and the climate emergency. I'm sure that if this bridge was being built at such an important gateway to Shrewsbury, this highly visible structure would be both policy compliant and attractive to look at. This episode needs to be taken on board as a lesson and be the last time we spend millions on active travel infrastructure which fails to achieve the stated aims of this council or fulfil the needs of the community. I fear that in its current form, this bridge will simply stand as a monument to how not to do things and short-sightedness, accusations which are levelled all too often in the public sector. Thank you.
Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, just to respond to the comments I made, it's the fallacy of sunk costs, isn't it? OK, some costs have been commissioned and incurred on this. Those could have been avoided if, as I said, dialogue had been entered into with either the town council or the bid, whose views were made clear in the plan application. But those costs are very small set against the potential loss of revenue to the council if it's precluded from active transport funding in the future, because you all know where this is going. Increasingly, highways budget allocations from government will be around active transport. You will have the most visible symbol of your denial of active transport in the county. Compared to the £8 million abortive costs on the previous roundabout, which nobody seems to care about at all, the abortive costs are very small. You could have used the LUFT bid to secure the finances for this. That bid hasn't gone in yet. You've still got time to do that. So there's an applicability there to secure additional resources, potentially from the government. And in terms of the timescales, plan application for this was given 5 months after the adoption of LTN 120. So the council had plenty of time. It knew what it was doing when it adopted LTN 120, presumably knew the impact on this scheme, had plenty of time to ensure it was compliant before it sought planning permission. Thank you.
Okay, been proposed and seconded. All those in favour, please show. All those against? That motion has fallen, I believe. We'll move on to the third motion, which is a motion that's been received from Councillor Joyce Barrow and is supported by Councillors Aldcroft, Harris, Schofield and Winwood.
Thank you. I'm bringing this forward after an encounter with a young woman outside an undertaker's in Oswestry. Her father had just passed away and he was in his early 50s and it was sudden. So the motion is, when a tenant or social or affordable housing sadly passes away, bereaved family and friends have very little time, sometimes as little as 2 weeks, to empty the property of the loved one recently lost, before having to hand back the property to the housing association. This is a very difficult time for those who are bereaved and often involves a lot of work to organise funerals and put the affairs of the recently departed in order. Adding such little time to empty a property with potentially a lifetime of memories into that period can push people who are already fragile into serious distress. Whilst we appreciate the urgent need to bring social and affordable properties back into use as quickly as possible, we also believe that the current arrangements are unreasonable and lack regard for the recently bereaved. Therefore, this council resolves to 1. Ask the leader and chief executive to request that Star Housing review their policy on this subject to consider a minimum 4-week period for vacating following the death of a tenant who lives alone. 2. Ask the leader and chief executive to write to registered social landlords operating in Shropshire Council's area to ask them to reconsider their policies on this subject to consider a minimum 4-week period for vacating following the death of a tenant who lives alone. And 3, ask the leader and chief executive to write to the Secretary of State for Levelling Up, Housing and Communities, I might add whoever that might be in the future, and ask them to consider legislating
or updating guidance to the sector on this subject to consider a minimum 4-week period for vacating following the death of a tenant who lives alone. Thank you. I ask you to support this motion.
Thank you. And it's formally seconded by Les Winwood, Chris Schofield. Which one of you? Les. Good. Are you reserving your right? All right. Chris, did you put your hand up because you wish to speak? It's not your turn yet. I'm just asking so I can put you on the list. All right. Well, answer me then, yes or no? All right. Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Councillor Barrow for bringing this. I think it's an important matter, and having dealt with this in the past, I think she's absolutely right. It causes enormous distress. I would like to suggest an amendment, which I think she's going to accept. The major issue you've got in this situation is that housing benefit ends at death. So suddenly a tenant who has, obviously lived on benefits, I expect 80–85% of our tenants receive benefits for their rent, suddenly has to pay the full rent, and that falls to the estate. And so all I would suggest is that in writing to the Secretary of State, we not only consider after legislation and guidance, but to review the housing benefit legislation at the same time, because there's no point giving the family a right to 4 weeks use of that house if they can't afford to pay for the rent that's then due, because the benefit, as I repeat myself, has ended with the death of the tenant.
I'd be very happy to accept that amendment.
Okay. So do we just take that into the main motion now? We don't. Yeah. All right. Okay, I have got Councillor Schofield, then Councillor Kevin Pardy. Councillor Chris Schofield, and you seconded. You reserved your right. I'll come back to you at the end.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think the council should show some compassion with this. I actually know of people that this has happened to and been contacted by them, and I've no problem with Councillor Kerr's amendment to it whatsoever. I just think the council should, as I said, show some compassion, and if it can be put to 4 weeks. There's some people that work away. They struggle to get to their relatives and everything to change it. And so I fully support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Kevin Pardy.
This is the main motion, yes, Chair, we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
The main motion now includes the proposed amendment because
Good.
It was
Right,
altered
thank you.
and the
I'd just like to say something that I never thought I'd say. I fully agree with Councillor Barrow. I think not just in this case, but in many cases that social housing officers are quite insensitive at very sensitive times. So I fully agree with her. Looking at part 3 or paragraph 3, I think Shropshire could be advantaged if we go to the levelling up scheme, because they're so short of ministers. We may end up with Kaczynski actually in the cabinet one day. So yes, I support the motion.
Okay, Councillor Rob Gittins. Then actually, I think I'm going to move to the vote because I don't think there's anybody that disagrees with this. So the debate really is just endorsement. So Councillor
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just my comments as the portfolio holder for built housing. Star Housing confirmed that they do ordinarily give a minimum of 4 weeks termination notice, and if the family asks for longer, they will try to accommodate where possible. Housing benefit, as Councillor Kerr said, the eligibility for that ends on the Sunday after death. The tenant and the families are advised at the time they or the estate will be liable for the full rent during this period, but experience shows that in many, if not all cases, these debts are actually written off. The council is currently reviewing the tenancy strategy, so we will look to incorporate this into it. Thank you.
Good. Now, Councillor Winwood, you did reserve your right.
Yes, just briefly, Chairman. Bereavement is difficult enough without having the difficulty of possessions of a loved one, and this is so right to make sure that this can be asked for across the board, not just with Shropshire Towns and Rural Housing. So that's essential. Over the years, been asked so many times about this, and I thank Councillor Barrow for bringing it forward.
Councillor Barrow. you got anything you wish to say with the overwhelming support that you seem to be receiving for this motion?
Sorry, I can't get this on. I'd like to thank Councillor Pardy particularly for agreeing with me for once. No, there's
Once in a
nothing else.
lifetime event, eh?
And definitely like to thank Councillor Kerr. I thought he brought a very good amendment, and I'm happy for you to go for the vote.
I'm happy to go to the vote. So all those in favour, please show. I think it's going to be unanimous, but just in case, any against, any abstentions, that's unanimous then. Thank you. We'll move on to the fourth motion, which is being received from Councillor Roger Evans and is supported by the Liberal Democrat group. Roger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Councillor Andy Boddington will be seconding it for your information. The motion, I hope, will be supported today. I'm not making any political points with it. This is brought here with the hope, expectation that we can enable the Shropshire Pound to help those residents who need help. Help all residents, no matter what age they are. The organisations, voluntary groups that could be helped is very wide. Any valid organisation that is nominated by residents could be helped. I've tried to let members know more by sending a set of slides from a presentation made to Councillor Boddington and myself a short time ago. Hopefully, members will have had a chance to look and view them. Also, links were included giving 3 examples of community lotteries. There are many, many, many more if one searches. What I am proposing is that the appropriate cross-party scrutiny committee look at this proposal and consider if it wishes to take it up, and if it does, how to take it forward. Report back to Council or Cabinet. I've tried to leave it open and not prejudge the outcomes of these deliberations. This was discussed some years ago, but at that time, for whatever reason, it was decided not to progress with it. With the rise in the cost of living in COVID, I and many others feel it is a way extra money can be generated, and with it, extra help provided for those helping the many Shropshire residents who need help. Public funding for the community sector is sinking fast. Discretionary grants are evaporating. Most voluntary services are great at raising funds, but many rely on an extra contribution from public funds to ensure they are stable, that they can apply for extra matched funding even. Often, help is also provided as one-off, as seed funding, to help set up a new initiative. This means that once set up, help is needed to enable it to continue. A community lottery can do all of this. Finally, although some claim it does, it has been proved many times that this does not, will not, take funding away from others. Let's ask a scrutiny committee to look at this, spend time seeing, checking how this could be taken forward, and so help all our many varied Shropshire communities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. And that's formally being seconded by Andy.
By me, yeah.
Yeah, you did say earlier. Thank you.
I reserve my right.
Yep, good. So I've got Kevin Pardy, Councillor Potter, and yourself. Anybody else at the moment? Okay. Councillor Pardy.
Thank you, Chair. Many years ago, I thought this would be a good idea. I thought about this, but as time goes on, you start to learn and you take on information. My football team is owned by a lady that runs Bet365. She has her earnings last year were over £300 million for herself. Now you got to ask, how can she do that? How can she get that much money? Well, she gets it from losers. That's how she gets the money. So when you, including my team, when you buy that first lottery ticket at a time when I think in the past year over 400 people have committed suicide due to the lottery or gambling, I can't support something like this because I don't want to be the person who puts the injection in the arm. And if you get the chance, there's a story on iPlayer about a young man that was the manager of a post office, and he started buying tickets, and then he started gambling, and then he started stealing money from the post office. He ended up in over £100,000 in debt owed. He went to prison, he lost his family, and he lost his job, obviously. And now he counsels people that gamble. I can't be part of something that may lead to somebody like him. Thank you.
Councillor Potter.
Thank you very much. I know motions seem to be very popular at the moment, and this is effectively asking for this to go to scrutiny. And I do wonder why we just didn't ask the chair of scrutiny or to consider this for the future work programme. So I'd like to move a simple amendment, because I think this has also been talked about in 2017 and again also responded to in 2019. So my amendment would be, as this item has been considered and responded to previously, that members of the Cross-Party Community Overview Committee will consider whether to add this item to their work programme at the next meeting in the normal manner. I think that would be the appropriate way for such an issue to be brought forward and considered by scrutiny, not for the sake of bringing a motion for motion's sake.
Roger.
I'm happy to accept it because I automatically think that if it would be referred to the scrutiny committee, it would go on their future programme. I haven't said next meeting or anything like this. It would go on their work programme to look at it. So yes, we'll take it forward, or hopefully we will all take it forward.
So you're happy then to take on board the amendment that's been proposed, which is that it's taken to scrutiny. So we won't actually be voting on your motion, because of course that's looking for it to be done now.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I was just going to ask if I could speak.
You can. Let me finish first. That's essentially that's all right.
What I can, Chairman, it's essentially the same as my motion, taking it to scrutiny and asking them to consider it. If they want to put it on their work programme, yes, but I would like it on an early work programme, but that's up to the scrutiny committee to decide. I've tried to leave it open as possible to try not to prejudge and for council to tell somebody to do something.
All right.
Scrutiny should be looking at it.
No, I don't disagree. Right. OK, so taking that on board, I've got councillors Halliday, Macy and then Picton.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd ask scrutiny to proceed with care with this, with their consideration. I can see this has been put forward with the absolute best intentions, and I certainly am not against raising money locally for Shropshire residents. But we have a really troubled relationship between gambling companies and the public sector at the moment. Camelot appear to be losing their contract for the National Lottery at the moment. And what they've been doing is they've moved towards app-based games rather than traditional draws. This risks worsening problem gambling. And they've also been reducing the amounts given to good causes. Camelot are now basically suing the government 600 million for those actions. So the gambling industry is a tricky industry to be working with. This year, the NHS has severed all links with the gambling industry funding that it was receiving. They have a very few clinics in the NHS treating people with problem gambling, and they've reduced that. They've completely ceased their relationship with the gambling industry because of similar sorts of problems. The external lottery managers who would run a local authority lottery are basically, although they're not supposed to get profit from doing this, basically they are profit-making companies, and they will give only 20%, or they're required to give only 20% back to the local authority. And it's just to remind people that gambling, around 60% of gambling income comes from problem gamblers. So you are potentially encouraging a problem within a gambling problem within the county. And people who have problem gambling, it's about 5% who are either problem gamblers or risky gamblers. So if you look around this chamber, there's probably about 4 of us, I don't know, maybe 5 within this chamber, and we probably all know people who have problem gambling. So who picks up the sorts of problems? Councillor Pardy's already talked about suicide, much higher risk of suicide with problem gamblers. There's problems with homelessness. It's estimated to cost us about 1.27 billion in terms of all those sorts of costs, and quite often it's the local authority who pick up those costs through our range of services. So I would really ask scrutiny to proceed with care for this. I certainly planned not to support this motion, but I'd say look very carefully at getting into an arrangement with the gambling industry.
Okay, Councillor Macy.
Thank you, Speaker. I think from my point of view, I don't doubt the intentions of the motion from Andy and Roger in terms of what they're looking to achieve. I think with the amendment, it just makes clear that we are a cross-party group. I do value the opinions of the members of it, and it gives them the chance to give that proper consideration. As far as I'm aware so far, we haven't turned down an item, at least for debate and consideration. But this makes it perfectly clear that it'll be the members of that committee that will make that decision and have the chance to feed into that. Obviously, wider members will have the chance to speak to their members who sit on that committee, and obviously they'll be aware that it'll be on that agenda. So if they want to come and speak, I would encourage them to do so, and they can take that into account then. So, but I just thought the amendment makes that bit a little bit clearer for people. But yes, it's a wider issue as well. So thank you.
Thank you. And just a reminder to members that any final decision on the recommendation from scrutiny would come before this council. So there is the ability to have a debate at that time. Right, I haven't got anybody else. Councillor Boddington, obviously there has been an amendment. Oh, Leslie Pixon, sorry. Good Lord, there's a fatal mistake.
A bit of a complex now. I suppose actually what I'm sort of going to try and encapsulate what a lot of people have said. I think we have looked at this before. One of the reasons we didn't take it forward is because actually financially it wasn't particularly viable for either this council or for the amount of returns it gave. For those of us who were at the LGA conference last week, and certainly Councillor Buckley and Councillor Kidd were there, I think it was quite interesting that there were 2 large stands advertising community lotteries, giving away lots of free chocolate. I obviously didn't touch it, but they were hard sell. They were very hard sell. And I think the points that have been raised regarding our responsibilities around gambling, and it is a very easy thing to fall into, especially if, like Councillor Pardy, you have a football team that is managed by a gambling organisation who push their fans very hard to use those gambling organisations. So I welcome the opportunity for it to go to scrutiny, because I think it can be looked at from all the issues that have been raised, and a report will come back to this council. But I would like to just reiterate, Councillor Evans, that you could have just asked Rob Macy to put this on the agenda, but that wouldn't be a soundbite, would it? So I appreciate that. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, thank you. So going back to you, Councillor Boddington, obviously there has been an accepted amendment. You reserved your right as a second.
I reserve my right indeed, and clearly a lot of this could now be discussed in detail in scrutiny, and I would recommend that members actually read the pack and set of slides that Roger sent around, because they'll clarify some of the misunderstandings that we've heard. Really, this is not a heavy gambling thing. The Gambling Commission rate it at the lowest level of risk. What it really is like a super tombola. Some of the prizes are a bit bigger, but the difficulty for anybody wanting to run a lottery for your village hall, just for an example, your football club or whatever it is the overheads are really rather difficult because of the licensing requirement. And this solves that. It's cost neutral to the council. half the money goes to the cause, the village hall, the football club. Another proportion, which I think is 20%, isn't it, Roger, goes into a central pot. And then the rest covers administration and the cost of the company actually running the lottery. And that's all encompassed, within a £1 ticket. This is not heavy stake stuff at all. And I think that'll become clear in scrutiny. So I hope that the majority of council at least will support this motion.
Thank you. Okay, well, we've all heard the debate. Roger, do you want to sum up?
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. Bet365 and the chief executive, and also the 180 odd million pound that the Euro lottery will be doing, are disgusting amounts of money. I don't support it, and I would urge government or whoever to actually make some limits there. I don't think that is acceptable to us. So yes, I don't support the big lotteries and all the rest, but what we're talking here is about local communities. Scrutiny are independent. I fiercely defend their independence. So we're not telling scrutiny to make this, to decide, to recommend this or anything. I'm asking the council, as a council, to say to the scrutiny, look, it could be used, please look at it. As was referred to earlier on, it's come to the council twice before as questions and tried to take it forward, and it's been accepted, battened down, didn't take it forward. Why it's come here and not gone on any agenda is it so that it is raised its profile. Scrutiny can make a decision on whether to take it forward and do that investigation and look at it. It isn't batted into the long grass, to use a phrase I use quite often. We need to take it forward and make a decision. Do we want to help our local communities using this method or not? I respect the comments about gambling and why the reasons are not. Yeah, we live in a democratic society and gambling is a disease. And should we support it or not? But I think the overwhelming here is that we can support our local communities by taking this forward. So I would urge that we do say, yes, we want scrutiny to look at it in their own time, but I hope they will take it on as an urgent basis on their agenda. It'll take 26 weeks, 28 weeks to get it through all the regulatory hurdles as per the slides, and it is shown there. And it also shows how much will be going for this one company, how much would go to the local funds that is selected by the participant in the lottery, and also what will go into central funds to be selected there. So let's take it forward and really try to help our communities. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Right, just before we move to the vote, so that we're expressly clear on what we're voting for and so that our clerks have got it down exactly in the minutes. Ed? Yep. Get the words of the amendment right.
So as this item has been considered and responded to previously, that members of the Cross-Party Communities Overview Committee will consider whether to add this item to its work programme at its next meeting in the normal manner.
Okay, thank you. So we've heard the debate. All those in favour, please show. Those against? I think that's passed by a significant margin. Thank you. Okay, we will move on to I believe the final one, crikey, which has been received from Councillor David Vasmer and is supported by the Liberal Democrat group. Sorry, Heather. Okay, Heather.
Thank you very much. You all, like me, will have considerable concerns about the cost of living and its impact across our area. I have people who are in real debt, and more people are going to Bishop's Castle Food Bank and so on. One of the ways that we can begin to look at helping those people across the area is actually to ask government to extend the scheme that's already in place for rural areas so that actually they're paying less on fuel. I would prefer that VAT was removed on most of these things, but actually transport costs are huge, and this was written long before petrol and diesel prices reached the level that they are now. At the present time, the average petrol price is at 191.43 and the diesel is around 199.05, but here it's 199.9. Some places it's well over £2. In rural areas, we don't have access to the supermarkets in the way you do. And if I look at Tesco's in Welshpool as opposed to Tesco's here in Shrewsbury, there's about a 5p difference. So what we're asking here is that actually that rural scheme that happens in some of the remote Scottish islands and other remote areas, but nowhere in Wales, and it does apply in those places, that we ask government to begin to roll that out or find some other way of actually bringing the cost of fuel down. This would actually impact not only on those very low paid individuals, but it would also impact on the council's budgets. Because for many of us, we have carers who are now paying for fuel in domestic care. The 45p does not cover the cost of travel in those areas where you can't get fuel at a reasonable price. It would apply to teaching assistants who are really out of pocket and are on low pay, and their 42 weeks wage is spread out over the whole year. So they're already on low wages, but then their money is averaged out over 52 weeks. So there are a huge range of people not able or beginning to really eat into their wages to actually do the jobs that they care for. We know that across Shropshire Council, the fuel prices going up are going to cost us quite a lot of money, and this would actually help us too as a council and help spread some of those costs. Talking to Tanya about social care, it is a real issue because many of our providers will now need more money to be able to deliver the care that they need. So in rural areas, we know that it costs around £800 more a year for people to travel because our bus services are so awful. We have very few buses to take people to work. We have very few buses to take people to hospital and all the rest of those things. We also know that in many of the rural areas, there's only one car. And if you look at the last census, and I'm going to look at this census, we have many households where the car is not present during the day because it's gone out to work. Those people are stuck at home, and the car that they are running is now becoming unviable. So this is a simple ask, and I know that actually it might be tricky to work out who to write to in government just at the time being in the Department of Transport. But if we could actually extend this to more of the rural areas where petrol prices are much more expensive, then it would make quite a difference, not only to those individuals on low wages, but actually to this council and many other councils in various places. So we're asking for you to write to them. It's nothing that special to do. It should be a cross-party issue, and expanding the rural fuel duty relief scheme should include rural Shropshire. A simple ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Being seconded by. Okay. Well, I've got Councillor Richard Marshall. I have to say it's not totally as I understand the scheme, but there you go. Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. Somebody that runs a logistics company, we're currently purchasing in the region of 10,000 litres of fuel every single week. So understandably, I'll have a very, very keen eye on the impact that the geopolitical events have created on the cost of fuel over recent months, and also the pricing mechanisms utilised to calculate the price. So anything that comes up that can reduce the cost, I'm extremely interested in. Unfortunately, with this motion, the proposer and the supporters of it don't fully understand the scheme. The Rural Fuel Duty Relief Scheme is put there to actually support extremely remote rural locations that have very few residents and significantly higher pump prices due to the transportation cost from refinery to the garages. It's also a way to incentivise retailers to make it more viable for them to supply fuel to those communities. Now, despite what Councillor Kidd just said, there are only 16 postcode areas in the United Kingdom covered under this scheme. Incidentally, none of them are in Wales. That they do include areas like the Inner and Outer Hebrides. Now, however much it may suit the narrative for some, I really do not think we can compare even the remotest parts of Shropshire with the Outer Hebrides. In fact, the vast majority of fuel supplied to Shropshire comes from refineries in Ellesmere Port and Minworth near Birmingham, so we don't have a great distance. The other important thing to consider with the scheme is that it is the retailer that claims the relief, not the motorist. It is down to the retailer if they pass that saving on to the motorist or not. Now, legislation in the scheme does state that they have 60 days to reduce the prices once they register for the scheme and are accepted. But the truth of that is the retailers will fudge their figures so they don't have to give the price back. Now, this has been proven over the last 11 consecutive years where fuel duty has been frozen. The Conservative government cut fuel duty by 5p a litre. The reality of that, very few retailers truly pass that cost back on to us, the motorists. So it's the retailers that were garnishing the amounts, not the residents. So if, as the motion is asking, we write to the DfT to ask for Shropshire to be likened to the Outer Hebrides and included into the scheme, I think it's highly unlikely that they will actually do anything with that. Now, understandably, fuel is a very emotive subject at the moment. We all want to see the cost of it reduced. So I will support the motion. However, far be it from me to ever suggest that the Lib Dems and their Member of Parliament for North Shropshire are very accomplished. They're coming up with sound bites without any real substance or reality. I will support the motion because I think it would be foolhardy not to if there is a chance that we could get a reduction in cost.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Dean Carroll and Councillor Julia Buckley. Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Speaker. Councillor Marshall has covered a range of points that I felt were pertinent to mention about remoteness versus rurality and the comparability of Shropshire to the locations that are currently covered by the scheme. However, I think that, as it's been raised, yes, we need to support it and at least explore whether government will permit us this. I fear what their reaction will be, but you don't ask, you don't get. I would like to, as the portfolio holder for highways, I'd quite happily like to extend an offer to the proposal. I see it on the agenda. It's Councillor Vasmer. I believe it's Councillor Kidd moved it, but whoever wishes to take part, to sit down and work out what postcode areas, because as you'll know, of course, the scheme is done by postcode area, not local authority area. I would assume that we wouldn't necessarily want to include every postcode area, and I'll take SY1, for example, because that would, I think, probably make a mockery of our case. But I'll happily sit down with you and we'll work out the postcode areas that we need to include in any application, and we can send it, I hope, cross-party from this council. Although I would say that we should caveat that with, we need to ensure that the retailers then do pass that on at the pump, because otherwise I fear that that will, whereas in some of the most remote areas where it's a very small garage that has that interest to retain its customers, I fear otherwise we'll just be funneling the money back into the likes of Morrison's and Tesco's and Sainsbury's into their bottom line. But with those caveats, I'm happy to support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Julia Buckley.
Yeah, I represent an area which is both urban and rural, and there's lots of factors in here, isn't there? It's not just the additional cost at the petrol pump, it's the limited number of petrol pumps. Until earlier this year, Bridgnorth had one petrol station. They had a monopoly, they could pick whatever price they wanted. And then local people in Bridgnorth don't always have the opportunity of local work, so they are obliged to commute to find economic employment, and we have little or no public transport. The only trains in Bridgnorth run on steam. Trains do not run, buses do not run early or late, so people really struggle to physically get to work. They have to drive, and so the price is fixed. They have no option, and so people really feel trapped in rural areas. I've got two comments really. One is how much I appreciated the knowledge and detail of Councillor Richard Marshall's information, but you started by explaining that you own a company which runs lots of logistics, and so from my understanding you might want to consider a pecuniary interest, because if I've understood correctly, your business would benefit from a drop in fuel duty. So I think you ought to be careful about whether you choose to vote.
Chair, can I?
And then secondly, if I could just explain the criteria of the existing scheme runs on two criteria. It's the cost of petrol currently in the postcodes, and the second criteria is low population density. So yes, we can absolutely be compared to the lowest population density in the country, because parts of our county really do have the most scarce population. So I think we should welcome Councillor Dean Carroll's request. I think we should look postcode by postcode. We should log the current cost of petrol in those areas, and we should be using our population density for once. It's actually going to do us a favour, and I'm delighted to hear cross-party support in the room. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just wondered if it would be useful for our monitoring officer to clarify. I imagine we all have an interest in this motion, because some of us.
Anyway,
I don't think it matters how many lorries we have and how big our businesses are.
Right.
And how many of us
I'm not
have
planning on having a debate within a debate with the best will in the world. It is for each individual member to make their own determination as to whether it is or not. It's certainly not for members, whether they've been members for 4 terms or a year and a half, to give recommendations to other members. It's down to the individual member to take that on board. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think we ought to give a bit of context to this. I mean, clearly we're all affected and probably pained by recent increases in fuel prices. But if you look over the last 10 years, the people who are now paying the most, who have had the most increases in their travel costs, are not private motorists. They're people who use the bus and people who use the train. And that's just a fact. If you look at the increases that have occurred in those costs, they far outstrip the increase in motoring costs, even if you take account of very recent additions. So rather than ploughing more money into that, I'd be more supportive of this motion if we propose to use the public money to assist people to move towards electric vehicles or indeed active transport, because that's the future, not continuing to subsidise petrol consumption. And I'm very uneasy, if I'm perfectly honest, about the idea that we asked government to do something which we all think is a nonsense, to compare Shropshire with the Outer Hebrides. And if anybody's been to the Outer Hebrides, I've been there a few times. It's a lovely place, but it isn't Shropshire. And I just think it demeans the council, frankly, to be writing to the government and saying, here's a scheme which anybody who's been to the Outer Hebrides would understand the importance of it to that community, but saying that you can apply to Shropshire. It creates a sort of bleating mentality where we're constantly asking for things which we don't think any rational process would deem us to be appropriate. So I'm not going to be supporting the motion on those grounds.
Okay. Well, I haven't got anybody else on my list. If I've missed anybody, nope. Okay, I will come back to you then, Councillor Houghton, as you reserved your right.
Thank you, Chair. Well, that's an interesting debate. Yes, we're not asking to be compared with the Outer Hebrides. We're asking for a realistic, approach to this, of writing a letter, a simple fact of writing a letter, highlighting the issues facing very rural parts of Shropshire. That isn't asking for comparison against the Outer Hebrides or anywhere else for that matter. So I do think that let's keep this in context. This isn't a motion saying the Outer Hebrides isn't a valid area to benefit from this. It's asking for the Department of Transport, the government, to consider our area and the residents who live and work here, particularly in those rural areas. And let's remember that many of those rural areas have limited or no public transport. They don't have a choice. People living and working there have to buy fuel. It is expensive. We know it's expensive. It's affecting all of us, but we really must try whatever we can do to go forward with this. So I was pleased to hear support around the chamber, but isn't it disappointing that retailers fudge their figures and get away with it when there is relief duty applied? And I think that's something that needs to be followed up separately. Councillor Kerr, you obviously disagree, but if you live in a very rural area such as South West Shropshire, the scarcity and the sparsity is comparable to some of those other areas, and people are badly impacted. So I do support wholly the motion put forward by Councillor Kidd. We must do the best we can for the residents that we are here to represent. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kidd.
Yes, thank you. And I can just reiterate, we're not expecting to be like the Outer Hebrides. We're just saying there is a real issue here, and waiting to actually implement and put money into public transport for those very rural areas of particularly South West Shropshire will just mean people become increasingly poor and can't work because they can't afford to go to work. We haven't got the time to deal with this, and I really want us to actually begin to highlight the real cost of living issues that we have across Shropshire. I welcome the cross-party support, and I welcome looking at postcodes, because those postcodes need to look at the public transport, the sparsity and all the rest of this. So some joint working to look at our residents and their needs now, I welcome, and it should be the way forward for all of us, because we all have residents stuck in these positions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, the motion has been proposed and seconded, and people have put their 2 pennies worth in. All of those who wish to support this motion, please show. I think that's an overwhelming majority, but if you want to stick your hand up because you don't, then feel free. No, I would imagine. Any abstentions? I think that is unanimous. All right, thank you. Okay, it is 1 minute to 1. I did say that we would stop for 20 minutes, which I am proposing to do. I know some members might wish to rattle on, but some others might not. So we will reconvene in this chamber at 20 past, and we will start at 20 past. If you are not here, you will not be taking part in the start of the councillors' questions. So thank you, councillors. Shall I just start? 20 past is 20 past, isn't it?
I know. Who's the first question? Who's the answer?
Okay, if members would take their seats and stop talking, it would be appreciated, because I would like to move on. Were there many out there, Heather? Good. There's a problem when you stop for lunch is some people see it as an opportunity to head for the hills again. Okay, item 15, questions from members. 6-member questions are allowed in accordance with Procedure Rule 15.3. Questions have been received from councillors Kate Halliday, Julia Evans and Roger Evans. Councillor Halliday, do you have a supplementary question?
A supplementary question, so I won't read out the current question. That's
Sorry?
You don't want me to read out the current question?
No, I think
Okay.
everybody's probably seen it.
Yeah.
So.
I do have a supplementary question. Thank you very much for the answer. I did notice the Shropshire Telford and Wrekin ICS board meeting on the 29th of June. A very similar question was asked, although not by me. And the reply that they gave was that the programme for the Health and Wellbeing Hub were working with the council to ensure that there is a specific bus route and that there is section 106 money from the wider Shrewsbury South Sustainable Urban Extension Development to support the new bus route. That's from Claire Parker. Is that your understanding?
I'm afraid on this one, so what the question relates to covers across 4 different portfolio areas, and I think specifically in terms of public transport, that's something I'd need to confer with Councillor Motley on, who holds public transport as the portfolio, and I don't attend the ICS board meetings as Councillor Jones has the health and social care brief. So if it's okay with you, I think I'm going to have to confer with colleagues and we'll get back to you in writing.
Thank you. Councillor Evans, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, I do, Mr. Speaker. And this is, oh, sorry.
Oh, he only says Evans on mine. I was hoping that that it would fall into place, but clearly not.
No, I don't. Thank you.
All right. So carry on, Roger. You don't need to say the first bit of meandering there. You can just get on to the question.
Thanks for the answer. Comparing the 2018 report, when 13,253 streetlights were still to convert, and the commitment made then that all would be converted during the following 3 years, plus considering both the climate emergency we declared some time ago and the financial savings, which was referred to earlier on today, why will it take until the winter 23-24 to complete this work? This is 5 years. Why the delay? And please, please do not quote COVID or supply problems. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. Oh, I'm not going to mention COVID, Councillor Evans. In terms of all of the delays historically in 2018 to 21, I wasn't the portfolio holder then, so don't know all the ins and outs, but I know that there were issues, and I will have to, I'm afraid, mention supply chains because the steel columns have been in rather short supply nationally for replacement columns where they're needed. What I can say is that we are endeavouring to roll out this programme as quickly as possible now, and end of March 2024 is a realistic conclusion to that programme. However, if we are able to accelerate the programme, if the supply of steel for the columns becomes easier and more available over the coming months and years, then we will be accelerating that programme. So March 2024 is more final end date, not necessarily the date that the last columns and LED lights will be converted if the circumstances enable us to do it quicker.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 16, the report of the Shropshire and Wrekin Fire and Rescue Authority. I'm going to invite Councillor Nigel Harting to present the report and move that it be received and agreed.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just like to move the Chair's report for the Fire Authority annual meeting, which was held on the 22nd of June. As you'll see from the papers before you, we re-elected our Chair, Eric Carter, as continuous Chair, and our own David Minnery here as Vice Chair, continuing in the light of the white paper, which will no doubt be reporting back to you on at the next meeting. But the papers are before you. I'm open to taking any questions that you might want to ask.
Okay, and although we don't vote on this because it's for noting, we do traditionally get it seconded.
I'll second
Councillor Wynne. Super, thank you very much. Anybody have any questions they want to ask? No. Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to item 17, which is the exclusion of the public and press. I move that in accordance with the provisions of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, and in particular paragraph 10.43 of the Council's Access to Information Procedure rules, the public and press be excluded for the consideration of the remaining business.
I second that.
Thank you. Okay, and we will not continue now until it has been indicated to me that the live feed